Chapter 851. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, this is young Master Chu. I'm sure you've heard of his name. After the Gu family had introduced Chu Fengmian, he looked at Old Ancestor Divine Spring and said, "Of course, this old man has naturally heard of young Master Chu's fame." Originally, this old man was also a little surprised. When did such a young hero appear in the central region? I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. I didn't expect to have the opportunity to meet you today. Old Ancestor Divine Spring looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile. Fame? Hearing Old Ancestor Divine Spring's words, Chu Fengmian secretly smiled. What fame did Chu Fengmian have? It was more like he was infamous. After all, Chu Fengmian could be said to be a thorn in the side of the 7 major sections. Old Ancestor Divine Spring is willing to make a deal with me. Could it be that you're not afraid of your reputation being tarnished? Chu Fengmian said slowly as he looked at Old Ancestor Divine Spring. Old Ancestor Divine Spring took the initiative to look for the Gu family head to do business with Chu Fengmian. This surprised Chu Fengmian a little. Chu Fengmian's current reputation was not good. If anyone got close to Chu Fengmian, they might be discovered by the 7 major sects and bring disaster upon themselves. Young Master Chu, you don't have to worry. Our Divine Spring Chamber of Commerce has always been a business. The grudges between you and the 7 major sects are not within our consideration. This will not affect our business. Old Ancestor Divine Spring said with a smile. What's more, apart from you and me, only the Gu family head knows about today's matter. I'm sure the Gu family head will not spread this news. Of course. The Gu family head nodded and then said, "Something has happened in my residence recently and I need to deal with it. As for the business matter, I'll leave it to the 2 of you." All right. Chu Fengmian nodded. The Gu family head was already extremely benevolent to do all of this. Young Master Chu, please come to my Chamber of Commerce to talk. What young Master Chu wants is all in my Chamber of Commerce. Old Ancestor Divine Spring looked at Chu Fengmian and said. All right then. Chu Fengmian said. The materials used to refine Saint-grade spirit pills were definitely not ordinary. Indeed, even Old Ancestor Divine Spring, who was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, would not carry so many precious materials with him. He might as well go with him. In any case, there was still time. There were about 20 days left until the 9 Regions Genius Tournament. If he was lucky, he might be able to take advantage of these 20 days to gather enough medicinal pills to refine Saint-grade spirit pills. At that time, he would be able to directly refine them into pills. Then, Chu Fengmian would be able to break through the life and death stage in one fell swoop, surpassing the life and death stage. According to the information that Chu Fengmian had gathered in the past few days, the 9 Regions Genius battle wasn't as simple as it seemed. Many of the warriors who participated in the 9 Regions Genius battle were extremely terrifying. Even Fate Realm cultivators on the 7th step of the life and death steps could participate. Perhaps these people were already sect masters with extremely high statuses in the 9 regions. However, as long as they weren't over 100 years old, they could participate in the 9 Region Genius battle. Therefore, in the 9 Regions Genius battle, there would be some Fate Realm cultivators appearing from time to time. As for Fate Realm ancestors, there were countless of them. It could be said that with Chu Fengmian's current strength, it wouldn't be easy for him to win the 9 Regions Genius battle. Therefore, if Chu Fengmian wanted to win the 9 Regions Genius battle, his current strength wasn't enough. Chu Fengmian had to increase his strength before the 9 Regions Genius battle. Great! Young Master Chu, let's go! Seeing Chu Fengmian agree, Ancestor Divine Spring's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He waved his hand and countless spiritual energies condensed into a spatial tunnel in front of the 2 of them. Ancestor Divine Spring and Chu Fengmian stepped into the spatial tunnel together. Every step taken in this space was equivalent to the distance of thousands of meters outside. The 2 figures were still moving through the spatial tunnel. From the outside, they had probably walked a very long distance. Ancestor Divine Spring, where are we going? Chu Fengmian also felt it. This place was already a long distance away from the ancient city of Ningzhou. This caused Chu Fengmian's eyes to involuntarily reveal a hint of coldness. Young Master Chu, don't worry. We are going to the treasury of the Divine Spring Chamber of Commerce. How could such treasures be casually placed in the Chamber of Commerce? Ancestor Divine Spring said with a smile when he saw the change in Chu Fengmian's expression. Our Divine Spring Chamber of Commerce has the materials that young Master Chu wants. Of course, if young Master Chu wants to obtain them, you will have to pay a large amount of wealth. You should know that the price of these materials is not cheap. Of course. Chu Fengmian nodded calmly. With a wave of his hand, a long river of spiritual stones suddenly opened up in front of him. In the long river of spiritual stones, countless spiritual stones were densely packed together. At a glance, there were at least 10 million royal-grade spiritual stones. It was definitely an enormous amount of wealth. Even the countless large chambers of commerce in the 9 regions would not be able to take out so many royal-grade spiritual stones in one go. This kind of royal-grade spiritual stone was something that even some ancestors would be reluctant to trade. The long river of spiritual stones flashed in front of Ancestor Divine Spring and was collected by Chu Fengmian. However, it was all seen by Ancestor Divine Spring. There was a hint of greed in Ancestor Divine Spring's eyes. Then, he slowly said, "Young Master Chu is indeed wealthy. In that case, let's speed up." Ancestor Divine Spring said as he quickened his pace. Chu Fengmian followed behind him and passed through the spatial tunnel again and again. Gradually, the spatial tunnel began to shrink, and finally, it reached its end. Ancestor Divine Spring took a step forward and stepped out. Chu Fengmian followed closely behind and also stepped out. Boom! 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 The moment Chu Fengmian left the spatial tunnel, he was surrounded by an extremely desolate canyon. In the canyon, poisonous gas was everywhere. There was a formation engraved in the poisonous gas, trapping Chu Fengmian's body in the formation. There was no way for him to escape. The poison gas dyed the entire canyon into a poison domain. It seemed like it was not something that could be created in a short period of time. Instead, it would take tens of thousands of years to create such a poison domain. Is this the Falling Sky Poison Valley? Chu Fengmian observed everything around him and suddenly said. Chapter 852. Chu Fengmian observed the surrounding scenery. He suddenly remembered where he was. The Falling Sky Poison Valley was one of the most dangerous places in the central region. It was said that any warrior who stepped into it would have a slim chance of survival. Even countless ancestors who had transcended the life and death realm had died in the Poison Valley. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, are you here to deal with me? Chu Fengmian said coldly. Old Ancestor Divine Spring opened the spatial tunnel to bring Chu Fengmian to such a dangerous place. His purpose could be seen at a glance. You are indeed a lunatic who dares to fight against the 7 major sections. You are still so calm after falling into a trap. An arrogant voice suddenly sounded. It was Old Ancestor Divine Spring. However, the benevolent look on Old Ancestor Divine Spring's face had disappeared. It was replaced by a gloomy and cold expression. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, I have no enmity with you. Why are you here to deal with me? Chu Fengmian looked at Old Ancestor Divine Spring and said slowly. He had a feeling that Old Ancestor Divine Spring had taken the initiative to look for the Gu family head to trade materials with Chu Fengmian. It was very likely that there was something hidden in it. Now, it seemed that there was indeed a trap. However, what Chu Fengmian did not understand was that he had no enmity with Old Ancestor Divine Spring. Why was Old Ancestor Divine Spring here to deal with him? Of course. We asked Old Ancestor Divine Spring to uphold justice for us. Chu Fengmian, you have fallen into our trap. How dare you be so arrogant now? At this moment, 3 figures suddenly walked out slowly from the side. These 3 figures were all extremely young warriors. They were the 3 supervisors in the Ning Province ancient city. The one who spoke was Huang Tieshue. Huang Tieshue, Jianyu, Gongsun Ao, It was the three of you who plotted against me? Chu Fengmian looked at the three figures with a cold look in his eyes. It seemed that the three of them had come to deal with Chu Fengmian. Old Ancestor Divine Spring should have been bribed by them and promised some benefits to deal with Chu Fengmian. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, you are the president of a large chamber of commerce. How could you be ordered by three juniors to deal with me? Chu Fengmian looked at Old Ancestor Divine Spring and said slowly. Are you not afraid that if I don't die today, I will slaughter your Divine Spring Merchant Guild in the future? Ancestor Divine Spring panicked when he heard Chu Fengmian's words and saw the killing intent in his eyes. He had naturally heard of Chu Fengmian's reputation. Chu Fengmian didn't even put the 7 great sects in his eyes. If they truly became enemies with the Divine Spring Merchant Guild, then the Divine Spring Merchant Guild would also be in great trouble. Ha ha, Chu Fengmian, you don't have to sow discord here. Do you think you can still leave here alive today? The supervisor of the Tianjian sect, Jianyu, suddenly interrupted Chu Fengmian. Since we're going to attack today, we're naturally going to kill you. Today, you won't be able to escape even if you have wings. Yet, you're still trying to talk back. That's right, Old Ancestor Divine Spring. If you help us kill this brat today, our 7 sects will naturally take care of your Divine Spring Chamber of Commerce's business in the future. Beside him, Gongsun Ao also spoke. This brat is a great threat to our 7 great sections. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, if you help us kill him today, you'll also make a great contribution to our 7 great sections. When the time comes, we'll report it to our sections. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, you can even join our 7 great sects as an outer sect consecrator. Hearing the three's words, Old Ancestor Divine Spring's expression slowly calmed down. Chu Fengmian's fierce reputation was great, but he was merely a life-and-death realm martial artist. As long as he made a move, Chu Fengmian wouldn't be able to survive. Moreover, in order to deal with Chu Fengmian today, they had already set up a trap in advance. In this inescapable net, Chu Fengmian had no way to escape. Chu Fengmian, give up resisting. You've provoked the 7 great sections. You're a wanted criminal in our central region. Everyone has the right to kill you. Old Ancestor Divine Spring looked at Chu Fengmian and sneered. Now, if you obediently cripple your own cultivation, we can still leave your corpse intact. Otherwise, if this old man makes a move, I'm afraid you won't even have a complete corpse. You'll only end up turning into ashes. After Old Ancestor Divine Spring finished speaking, his aura suddenly swelled. The strength of the 6th step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm, was completely displayed. Just his aura alone was enough to suppress countless life and death realm martial artists. The 3 inspectors beside him were the same. Their spiritual energy erupted. In an instant, countless spiritual energies bombarded Chu Fengmian. Trapped by the array, Chu Fengmian could only stand in place. Even if he wanted to dodge, it was impossible. Originally, I let you go because I wanted to catch a big fish. I didn't expect to only attract a mere Old Ancestor Divine Spring. But no matter. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Looking at the smiling eyes of Old Ancestor Divine Spring and the 3 inspectors, the corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled into a mocking smile. Just the 3 of them wanted to deal with Chu Fengmian? With Chu Fengmian's current strength, he could even contend against a heavenly fate realm martial artist. Old Ancestor Divine Spring, who was merely in the heart-refining realm, had to die if Chu Fengmian wanted him dead. Just as the countless spiritual energies bombarded Chu Fengmian, the aura on Chu Fengmian's body was fully displayed. The aura that erupted from Chu Fengmian's body even surpassed Old Ancestor Divine Spring's. The Battle Dragon carriage suddenly condensed under Chu Fengmian's seat. On the Battle Dragon carriage, a gorgeous umbrella suddenly opened and turned into a 7-colored light, forming a barrier in front of Chu Fengmian. This 7-colored barrier blocked all the spiritual energies on the outside. None of them could get close to Chu Fengmian. Old Ancestor Divine Spring and the 3 inspectors attacked together, but at this moment, they couldn't do anything to Chu Fengmian. How could this kid have such a spiritual tool on him? Could it be the heavenly demon carriage? 9 Demon City's heavenly demon carriage. Did it really fall into this kid's hands like the rumors said? Huang Tieshue saw the battle dragon carriage that appeared under Chu Fengmian's seat. At a glance, he could tell that it was extraordinary. It was the 7-colored light that was emitted from the battle dragon carriage that was enough to resist their attacks. Only the 9 Demon City's heavenly demonic treasure carriage could do this. The heavenly demon carriage. Hearing Huang Tieshue's words, Jianyu, Gongsun Ao, an old ancestor divine spring couldn't help but look over. Everyone's eyes were filled with greed. Chapter 853. The Heavenly Demon Treasure Carriage. It was the most precious treasure of 9 Demon City. Even with their status, they couldn't come into contact with such a spiritual tool. This kid has obtained countless benefits in the returning ruined sky. It's said that he even obtained the inheritance of an ancient sect. If we kill him, all of his treasures will belong to us. Huang Tieshue looked at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. That's right. Kill. Jianyu looked at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. Kid, no matter how many treasures you have fallen into our ambush today. Today, you will die without a doubt. A sharp sword intent suddenly condensed from Jianyu's body. This sword intent soared into the sky. A spiritual sword was suddenly unsheathed in his hand. Suddenly, a sword light slashed at Chu Fengmian. This was Jianyu's true strength. There was no weakling among the disciples of the 7 great sections. The sword light slashed out and hit the 7-colored light. The rainbow-colored light seemed to be in a stalemate against the sword, and it seemed like it was about to be broken. Trash like you dare to deal with me? Such a weak sword technique. Break for me. The sword light broke through the 7-colored light and slashed at Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian's face revealed a disdainful sneer. His palm moved, and a surge of spiritual energy suddenly shot out. In the sky, it turned into a battle dragon claw and suddenly enveloped Jianyu. The sword will on Jianyu's body was instantly destroyed by the battle dragon's claw. Jianyu's body was torn apart by a massive force, completely torn apart. Ah! Jianyu felt endless pain as his body was torn apart by a powerful force. He let out a loud scream. With his peak life and death realm cultivation, even if his body was torn apart, he wouldn't die on the spot. However, the pain was unbearable. Especially when Chu Fengmian's battle dragon claw didn't stop after tearing his body. It even wanted to take away all of his blood essence. Once Chu Fengmian took away his essence blood, Jianyu would die on the spot. Not good. Old Ancestor Divine Spring quickly saved Jianyu. Gongsun Ao and Huang Tieshue were startled seeing this. He didn't expect that Chu Fengmian would still have such ferocious strength after falling into this ambush. The two of them suddenly raised their hands and shot out a wave of spiritual energy. The array around Chu Fengmian was suddenly activated. The entire formation turned into an iron chain, moving to bind Chu Fengmian's body, trying to bind him directly. Break! Chu Fengmian said coldly. Bursts of dragon might burst from his body, and the dragons gathered around him. The dragons danced. The moment the iron chain approached Chu Fengmian's body, it was shattered by the terrifying dragon's might. Chu Fengmian suddenly stood up and stood on the battle dragon treasure chariot. The whole world seemed to have turned into a domain of dragons, trembling under Chu Fengmian's feet. Even the poisonous miasma in the surroundings was completely suppressed in the face of this dragon's might. This aura had simply reached a pinnacle. Die! Chu Fengmian looked at Jianyu and clenched his fist. The battle dragon claw beside Jianyu also clenched. Jianyu's body was constantly twisted in Chu Fengmian's palm, as if he was about to be crushed. Boy, you still want to kill in front of this old man? Old Ancestor Divine Spring suddenly took a step forward and rushed in front of Chu Fengmian. A huge fist wind blasted towards Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian wanted to kill Jianyu in front of him, which was simply a slap to his face. Moreover, Jianyu's identity was the supervisor of the Tianjian sect. If Jianyu died in Chu Fengmian's hands, it would cause countless troubles for him in the future. In any case, old ancestor Divine Spring wouldn't allow Chu Fengmian to kill someone in front of him. "Old man, are you courting death?" Chu Fengmian's eyes became incomparably cold. Behind him, the shadow of an ancient battle dragon was faintly discernible. The power in his body was rising steadily. Facing old ancestor Divine Spring's fist, Chu Fengmian also condensed a fist and blasted it out. However, this fist was supported by 10,000 dragons, and the dragons roared. The whole canyon was filled with dragon roars. Old ancestor Divine Spring's fist began to shatter in front of the endless dragon's might, and its spiritual energy was completely melted away. "Old ancestor Divine Spring, do you really think that you can kill me just because you're with these trash? Unfortunately, with your strength, in my opinion, you're still inferior to a dog." Chu Fengmian sneered. His fist wind was as fast as lightning. The huge spiritual energy was like a storm, directly engulfing old ancestor Divine Spring's body. Old ancestor Divine Spring's body was completely engulfed by the fist wind. He could feel Chu Fengmian's fist wind tearing his body apart. What kind of power is this? Life and death realm. How can a life and death realm martial artist possess such a terrifying power? Old ancestor Divine Spring was engulfed by the fist wind. The protective spiritual energy around his body was instantly shattered, and his body was constantly being torn apart under the power of the fist wind. One move was enough to push old ancestor Divine Spring into a desperate situation. Not to mention a life and death realm martial artist, even an old ancestor who had transcended life and death realm would have to be at the 7th step of the life and death steps, the Heaven's Mandate realm martial artist, to be able to do this. Heaven's Mandate realm. How can a mere life and death realm martial artist possess the power of a Heaven's Mandate realm martial artist? Old ancestor Divine Spring roared loudly. His eyes were filled with disbelief. A life and death realm martial artist who could challenge an old ancestor could be called an absolute genius. How could he have imagined that Chu Fengmian's strength had reached such a level? Even he wasn't Chu Fengmian's opponent. Old ancestor Divine Spring, remember not to offend people you shouldn't offend in your next life. Chu Fengmian looked at old ancestor Divine Spring as if he was looking at a dead man. He had no enmity with old ancestor Divine Spring before. However, old ancestor Divine Spring couldn't hold back his greed and came to deal with Chu Fengmian. Therefore, Chu Fengmian couldn't let him live. In the blink of an eye, Chu Fengmian made his move again. With a single thought, he condensed the battle dragon claw. It broke through the space and descended from the sky in an instant, bombarding ancestor Divine Spring's body. Chapter 854. No one was able to react in time. Such a change had actually occurred in an instant. The battle dragon claw enveloped old ancestor Divine Spring's body. In an instant, old ancestor Divine Spring's body was completely destroyed by the battle dragon claw. With a loud rumble, the entire Poison Fall Valley shook. Old ancestor Divine Spring's body was forcibly torn apart by the power of the battle dragon claw. When Desolate Iron Blood and Gongsun Ao hurriedly looked over, they saw old ancestor Divine Spring's body was already torn apart by the battle dragon claw. As Chu Fengmian suddenly attacked, all the essence blood in ancestor Divine Spring's body was taken away by Chu Fengmian and swallowed into his body. Rumble. After losing his essence blood, old ancestor Divine Spring lost all his strength. His body was torn apart in the air, and he could no longer recover. Old ancestor Divine Spring, whose strength had reached the 6th step of the life and death steps, was forcibly torn apart by Chu Fengmian. The moment Desolate Iron Blood, Gongsun Ao, and the others saw this scene, their faces changed. Without any hesitation, the two of them turned around and flew into the distance. Now, even old ancestor Divine Spring, whom they had invited, was easily defeated by Chu Fengmian. If an old ancestor at the 6th step of the life and death steps wasn't Chu Fengmian's opponent, how could they contend against him? The two's eyes were already filled with fear. This kind of strength was simply too shocking. Even the two of them couldn't imagine that a life and death realm martial artist could possess such terrifying strength. In the 9 regions, Who among the younger generation dared to compete with Chu Fengmian? Still want to escape? Die for me. Chu Fengmian sneered. With a move of his mind, he released all the power of the battle dragon wool in the air. Immediately, it turned into two enormous claws of a battle dragon, grabbing at Huang Tieshue and Gongsun Ao. The two of them hurriedly turned around, trying to gather their strength to resist. However, in front of the battle dragon claws, their condensed spiritual energy was almost meaningless. Puff! The defensive spiritual energy on their bodies was broken on the spot, and they were directly grabbed by Chu Fengmian into the palm of his hand. Gongsun Ao, Huang Tieshue, and Jianyu, the three supervisors from the seven great sects, were enough to flaunt their power in Ningzhou ancient city. However, they were now firmly suppressed in Chu Fengmian's hands. The three of them no longer had their previous swaggering appearances. When they fell into Chu Fengmian's hands, they were practically like ants, shivering in fear. Kid, let us go at once. Our masters are the ancestors of the seven great sects. If you dare to kill us, our master will definitely kill you. When desolate Ironblood fell into Chu Fengmian's hands, it roared loudly, still wanting to threaten Chu Fengmian. However, the corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth revealed a somewhat mocking smile. At this point, he still wanted to threaten Chu Fengmian. Others might be afraid of the seven great sects, but Chu Fengmian wasn't. The people he wanted to kill were precisely those from the seven great sections. These three people wanted to provoke Chu Fengmian one after another, so he should have killed them on the spot. However, Chu Fengmian had other plans in his mind. Killing them now would be too easy for them. Heavenly Death Seal. A black seal suddenly condensed from Chu Fengmian's palm. It suddenly divided into three and flew towards the three people's heads. The moment they saw the black seal, the eyes of the three supervisors were filled with fear. You want to subdue us? No. We will never be subdued by anyone. Chu Fengmian, don't even think about it. The three people roared together. They were also the genius disciples of the seven great sections. How could they not see that Chu Fengmian was using the seal to subdue them? Once the seal was engraved, they would truly become slaves. No, it would be worse than slaves. They wouldn't even be able to commit suicide. They would only be under Chu Fengmian's control. At this moment, the spiritual energy in their bodies began to become chaotic. Their bodies began to swell. Self-destruct. For the three of them, they would rather self-destruct than be engraved by Chu Fengmian's seal and become his slaves. However, the spiritual energy that they had just condensed dissipated in the face of Chu Fengmian's pressure. The three of them were now in Chu Fengmian's hands. Even if they wanted to self-destruct, it was impossible. No! Miserable screams rang out as the heavenly death seal was engraved into the minds of the three of them. In an instant, their bodies were under the control of the seal. Even if they resented Chu Fengmian, they could only obey his orders and become his slaves. Master. The three of them directly knelt on the ground in front of Chu Fengmian and respectfully said, "What is the cultivation level of the three of you?" Chu Fengmian calmly asked. Master, the strength of our masters is at the sixth step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm. They are slightly stronger than old ancestor Heavenly Spring. Huang Tieshue knelt on the ground and respectfully replied. An old ancestor at the sixth step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm, was not difficult to deal with. Chu Fengmian thought inwardly. For him, as long as it was not the seventh step of the life and death steps, the Heaven's Mandate Realm experts would be enough to deal with him. The seventh step of the life and death steps was a bottleneck and also a threshold. After crossing this step, one could be called an emperor. For example, the Night Emperor, the Wind Emperor, and the others were called emperors. This kind of person had an extremely high status even in the seven sections. They rarely appeared outside and would only appear when it was related to the sect. Chu Fengmian did not kill the three of them now. Instead, he used the heavenly death seal to control them. His purpose was to catch a big fish. The three of you, condense the jade talisman and tell your masters to come and deal with me. Chu Fengmian coldly said. With his current strength, it was still difficult to deal with the 7 sections. However, killing a few old ancestors would also consume the strength of the 7 sections. Moreover, the central region was already in chaos with the emergence of the 6 demon gates. In this case, Chu Fengmian would make it even more chaotic. The more chaotic the central region was, the better it was for Chu Fengmian. Chapter 855. Yes, Master. Hearing Chu Fengmian's order, the 3 didn't hesitate to summon jade talismans and call for their masters. Soon, jade talismans flew back one after another. It seemed like they were replying. Master, we've followed your order and called for our masters to help us deal with you. Huang Tieshua said respectfully. All right, let's lure them into the Poison Fall Valley. Chu Fengmian said. Although the miasma in the Falling Sky Poison Valley didn't have much of an effect on the old ancestor, it was extremely secluded. Almost no martial artist was willing to enter. It was the best place to kill. Yes. Huang Tieshua respectfully retreated and continued the conversation. Chu Fengmian sat there and waited. A few hours later, 3 figures suddenly appeared and landed in the Falling Sky Poison Valley. Tieshua, you found traces of Chu Fengmian? Where is he? One of the old men suddenly asked. It was Huang Tieshua's master, Iron Blood Ancestor. He looked at Huang Tieshua with a cold smile. Chu Fengmian, that brat, slaughtered the disciples of our 7 great sects in the returning ruined sky. Now, he dares to set foot in the central region. Tell me, where is he now? I'll go and kill him now. It's said that he obtained countless benefits in the returning ruined sky. He even obtained the inheritance of an ancient sect. Killing this kid is no different from obtaining an incomparably huge treasure trove. Iron Blood Ancestor's face was filled with excitement. For a life and death realm martial artist to have so many spirit tools on him was indeed no different from a moving treasure trove. Everyone wanted to obtain it. Brother Iron Blood, calm down. Chu Fengmian isn't easy to deal with. Let's ask him about the situation first. Another old ancestor suddenly spoke. This old ancestor had a piercing sword intent. He was obviously Jian Yu's master, Exterminating Sword Ancestor. Exterminating Sword Ancestor said as he looked at Jian Yu and saw his injuries with a single glance. Jian Yu, what happened? How did you get so injured? Master, we ran into Chu Fengmian earlier. We originally wanted to kill him, but we didn't expect him to be so sinister. That's why we were so heavily injured. Jian Yu said respectfully. Every word he said was according to Chu Fengmian's orders. Even if the real Jian Yu wanted to expose Chu Fengmian's intentions, it would be pointless. He could only follow Chu Fengmian's orders and say what he wanted to say. Fortunately, we managed to trap him in the formation. Master, look ahead. Chu Fengmian is inside the formation. Jian Yu pointed at a formation that was set up in the valley before him and said slowly. We're not strong enough to kill this kid. That's why we called Master here to kill this kid. Oh? This Chu Fengmian is actually so strong that even the 3 of you aren't his match. Exterminating Sword Ancestor's eyes flickered. He seemed a little surprised, but when he saw the array, a satisfied look appeared on his face. He nodded and said, well done. This kid has countless fortuitous encounters. Once I kill him, I'll definitely reward all of you. Brother Iron Blood. Brother Exterminating Sword, what are we waiting for? Let's kill that kid first before anything else happens. The last ancestor, Gongsun Ao's master, Ancestor Yeming, said. His eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. He looked at the figure in the formation and couldn't wait any longer. All right, let's kill this kid first. Patriarch Iron Blood and Patriarch Exterminating Sword nodded. All of a sudden, the 3 of them fell into the formation. As soon as the 3 of them fell into the formation started to spin. Chu Fengmian's figure in the center of the formation suddenly disappeared. Instead, countless spiritual swords suddenly appeared within the array, forming a huge sword array that directly enveloped the 3 of them. What's going on? Why did a sword formation suddenly appear? The moment the three of them saw the sword formation, their expressions changed. The sword formation was so sharp that it was obviously not something that the three of them could set up. "Didn't you three want to kill me? Unfortunately, you're the ones who will die today." Chu Fengmian's figure suddenly appeared in the sword formation, and the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. "It seems that everyone wants my wealth. I didn't expect you three to be so easily tricked into coming here." Beside Chu Fengmian, the three of them who looked respectful just now were now kneeling in front of him. Exterminating Sword Ancestor looked at Chu Fengmian and realized that this was all part of Chu Fengmian's plan. It was Chu Fengmian who lured them into the sword formation. "I didn't expect you to be so bold. Since you dared to lure us here today, it seems that you're courting death." Ancestor Ironblood looked at Chu Fengmian with a ferocious smile. "It seems that these three trash are under your control. But it doesn't matter. There are as many trash like them in the 7 sections. You're courting death today. How dare you show up in front of me? You're really bold. Today is the day you die." The moment Ancestor Ironblood spoke, all the spiritual energy in his body was activated. Under his feet, the Desolation Great Path condensed in an instant, and endless Desolation Divine Power was added to his body. His aura was so terrifying that it was several times stronger than Ancestor Divine Springs. The ancestors from the 7 sects were also much stronger than the ordinary ancestors outside. Moreover, Ancestor Ironblood was an expert who had been famous for a long time. Desolate Chaotic Flow. Suppress it. Ancestor Ironblood made a move. Suddenly, waves of desolate divine power burst out, condensing into a long river and bombarding Chu Fengmian. The long river was filled with waves of desolate divine power. Each wave of desolate divine power was almost as strong as the bombardment of an ancestor. There were tens of thousands of waves of desolate divine power in the long river. It was as if tens of thousands of ancestors were attacking Chu Fengmian at the same time. This move vividly displayed the strength of desolate Ironblood. However, Chu Fengmian didn't even look at such a fierce move. He didn't even pay attention to it. Suddenly, tens of thousands of spiritual swords flew out beside Chu Fengmian. The tens of thousands of spiritual swords condensed together to form a huge sword light, which suddenly slashed out. The long river of desolate Great Path was instantly shattered by the sword light. Chapter 856. The massive sword light blasted out, instantly shattering the desolate ancient river. The spiritual energy within it was completely destroyed on the spot. The Ironblood Patriarch's power was no match for Chu Fengmian's at all. He was easily defeated by Chu Fengmian. The Ironblood Patriarch's body was sent flying as a look of disbelief appeared on his face. "How is this possible?" Old Ancestor Ironblood yelled. He didn't believe that with his strength, he would lose to Chu Fengmian, a mere life and death realm martial artist. Primordial Chaos Divine Strike. The Ironblood Ancestor gathered his spiritual energy once again. Waves of primordial divine power were added to his body, causing his aura to rise steadily until it reached the most powerful point. All of a sudden, he threw a punch at Chu Fengmian. The target of this punch was Chu Fengmian's chest. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Ridiculous. Mysterious black sword formation. "Break for me." Chu Fengmian stood where he was and coldly shouted. Suddenly, the spiritual swords around them all appeared. There were a total of 100,000 spiritual swords arranged into an inescapable net. The power that the Ironblood Ancestor had just gathered was shattered on the spot in front of the 100,000 spiritual swords. Not a single bit of power was left and all of it was ruthlessly strangled. At the same time, countless sword lights from the 100,000 spiritual swords slashed at the Ironblood Ancestor. With the black mysterious sword formation's current might, even if it encountered a ruler in the Fate realm, it could trap the ruler and delay him for a period of time. Using it to deal with a great ancestor in the heart-refining realm was almost a piece of cake. The Ironblood Ancestor's body was sent flying again. Several sword lights had already penetrated his body. The Ironblood Ancestor could recover from this kind of injury in an instant. However, he had also lost 20 to 30% of his blood essence because of the spiritual swords. This also meant that his current strength had dropped by 20 to 30%. The Iron Blood ancestor had never encountered such a crisis in the 9 regions. However, this was far from over. The sword lights that filled the sky continued to slash at the Iron Blood Patriarch. The Iron Blood Patriarch was rooted to the spot, unable to escape. If this continued, it would not be long before the Iron Blood ancestor's death was destined. Not good. Patriarch Exterminating Sword and Patriarch Dark Knight also noticed the danger Patriarch Iron Blood was in. The power of the sword formation was beyond their imagination. It was enough to kill an old ancestor in the heart-refining realm. Such a powerful sword formation was probably only comparable to the mountain protection formation of some large sections. Sky Splitter. At this moment, Exterminating Sword Ancestor also made his move. A spiritual sword suddenly condensed in his hand, and he slashed it at Chu Fengmian. This sword blade contained endless sword essence. This was the sword principle of Exterminating Sword. It slashed toward the sword formation as if it wanted to break a hole in it to save the Iron Blood ancestor. However, when his sword edge approached the mysterious black sword formation, the mysterious black sword formation was already prepared. The 10,000 spiritual swords were already waiting for him. The moment the sword blade slashed toward the Iron Blood ancestor, the 10,000 spiritual swords condensed into a sword shadow and suddenly slashed down from the sky. Ancestor Exterminating Sword Ancestor's sword was completely destroyed in the blink of an eye, leaving no room for maneuver. This is the ancient sword technique. The ancient sword technique is incomparably mysterious. How can this sword formation be used? Exterminating Sword Ancestor stared at the swordsmanship used by the black mysterious sword formation in disbelief. He couldn't understand. Even if many Sword Dao Grandmasters were here, they might not be able to learn or use such an ancient and mysterious swordsmanship. However, this sword formation, which was just an inanimate object, was able to use such a mysterious ancient sword technique. How could he believe this? No matter how powerful a formation was, it was still an inanimate object. Therefore, there was always a way to break it. No matter how powerful the formation was, there was always a way to find its flaws. However, the power of the mysterious black sword formation was beyond Exterminating Sword Ancestor's understanding. A sword formation actually knew the ancient sword technique. This was simply a shocking thing. No Sword Dao Grandmaster could do it. However, Chu Fengmian was able to do it. Chu Fengmian had comprehended the 9 realms sword technique and integrated countless sword techniques into it. It was enough to say that the shadow of all sword techniques in the world could be found within the 9 realms sword technique. The 9 region swordsmanship was completely integrated into the black profound sword formation by Chu Fengmian. It could be said that the mysterious black sword formation knew more sword techniques than countless sword principal grandmasters. It was no longer a spiritual artifact, but an existence that was above spiritual artifacts. It was an existence that was evolving into an ultimate immortal weapon. Kill! Chu Fengmian spat out a word indifferently. The mysterious black sword formation understood Chu Fengmian's intention. Immediately, its murderous aura intensified, and the spiritual swords no longer trapped people to resist. Instead, they used an extremely fierce killing move. Beams of sword light slashed out one after another. Peerless Sky Sword. Exterminating Sword Ancestor moved the sword in his hand again when he saw the countless beams of sword light coming at him. His figure instantly split into tens of thousands of copies in the air. Each of them was Exterminating Sword Ancestor's original body, which contained the power of his original body. Tens of thousands of beams of sword light slashed out at the same time. Then, tens of thousands of spiritual swords collided with each other. The sword essence of 10,000 swords in one strike? But using this kind of sword technique in front of me is like selling water by the river. Chu Fengmian sneered. The sword essence on his body moved. The piercing sword essence suddenly burst out from Chu Fengmian's body. It was simply terrifying to the extreme. The sword essence was all added to the mysterious black sword formation. Instantly, the tens of thousands of beams of sword chi shot out by exterminating sword ancestor were all shattered. Not a single beam of sword chi could contend with Chu Fengmian's sword essence. Impossible. Impossible. How can your sword essence be so powerful? Exterminating sword ancestor's face turned deathly pale the moment he sensed Chu Fengmian's sword essence. A confrontation between sword cultivators was a confrontation between sword essences. Exterminating sword ancestor had thought that Chu Fengmian was only relying on the mysterious black sword formation, so he could still break it with sword essence. But now, the sword intent that Chu Fengmian displayed had simply destroyed his last bit of confidence, causing his face to turn extremely pale. Chapter 857. Exterminating sword ancestor was defeated within a few moves. With his current strength, he no longer had the ability to contend with Chu Fengmian. The sword will was broken. It was a crushing defeat for a sword cultivator. Die! Chu Fengmian casually uttered a single word. Sword light filled the sky, piercing through the bodies of Patriarch Ironblood and Patriarch Exterminating Sword in an instant. They turned into a cloud of blood mist in the air. Their essence blood was integrated into the black mysterious sword formation. It increased the power of the black mysterious sword formation. Crack! Crack! Some of the spiritual swords in the black mysterious sword formation were on the verge of upgrading. After devouring the essence blood, they began to transform and upgrade. The essence blood of these patriarchs was more nutritious than any tonic in the world. It contained the countless fortuitous encounters they had in their lives, which gave them their current strength. Now that it was integrated into the black mysterious sword formation, it was enough to transform countless spiritual swords in the black mysterious sword formation. Very good. The corners of Chu Fengmian's mouth curled into a smile. The two empty rings in his hand were the empty rings of the two great ancestors. It seemed that he had attracted a few big fishes this time. It was not easy for Chu Fengmian to encounter patriarchs in the heart-refining realm. Moreover, they usually cultivated in the sacred grounds of their sections. Chu Fengmian didn't even have the chance to kill them before. This was definitely the best opportunity. He would not let any of the three patriarchs go. Chu Fengmian's gaze slowly shifted to the last of the three patriarchs, Patriarch Yiming. Patriarch Yiming had witnessed everything with his own eyes, but he didn't make a move. He just stood there. However, Chu Fengmian knew that Patriarch Yiming wasn't standing there because he had lost his fighting spirit, but because he was accumulating spiritual power. He seemed to be accumulating spiritual power to kill Chu Fengmian in one blow. Chu Fengmian, I didn't expect your strength to reach such a level. It seems that the world has underestimated you. Patriarch Yiming looked at Chu Fengmian and said slowly. The strength displayed by Chu Fengmian was definitely much more terrifying than what was rumored. According to the rumors, Chu Fengmian was strong enough to kill ordinary patriarchs, although that was only limited to life-saving patriarchs. In fact, this rumor was already an exaggeration in the eyes of countless experts. After all, a life-and-death expert could kill a life-shatterer old ancestor. Only the peerless geniuses nurtured by the seven great sects could achieve this. Chu Fengmian was just a warrior from the Northern Territory who had some fortuitous encounters. Therefore, many people felt that the description of Chu Fengmian's strength in the rumors was a bit exaggerated. But now, seeing Chu Fengmian in action, Patriarch Yiming finally understood that the description of Chu Fengmian's strength in the rumors wasn't too high, but too low. To be able to kill a heart-refining realm old ancestor, this was just a life-and-death realm martial artist. In the entire Central Territory, or even in the 9 territories, it was almost impossible to find someone comparable to Chu Fengmian. You've been hiding your strength and secretly came to Central Territory. Although I don't know why you're here, no matter what strength you have, you'll die today. Just as he finished speaking, the expression in Ancestor Yiming's eyes suddenly changed. His eyes seemed to have become incomparably deep. His eyes were shrouded in a layer of darkness. This darkness was so deep that one could only see a bottomless darkness at a glance. Darkness descends. Darkness dominates heaven and earth. Patriarch Yeming suddenly made his move. The moment Chu Fengmian saw Patriarch Yeming's eyes, his body seemed to be shrouded in endless darkness. Everything around him was shrouded in darkness. It was impossible to see Patriarch Yeming's body clearly. The layers of darkness continued to press down on Chu Fengmian's body. It even wanted to suppress Chu Fengmian directly. Patriarch Yeming had been accumulating his strength all this time. He hadn't made his move just now because of this moment. The layers of darkness shrouded Chu Fengmian's body, as if he couldn't break free from it no matter what he did. He could only exhaust his spiritual energy in the darkness. One day, he would be suppressed by Patriarch Yeming. Patriarch Yeming's strength was much stronger than Patriarch Iron Blood and Patriarch Exterminating Sword. His move made Chu Fengmian's eyes reveal some astonishment. However, the corner of Chu Fengmian's mouth was still hanging with a faint smile. Your struggle is futile. Darkness rules the world, so how about I break your darkness? Chu Fengmian smiled contemptuously. The ancestral dragon supreme sword suddenly condensed in his hand and was unsheathed. This unsheathed sword light contained the sharpest sword in the world. Suddenly, it slashed forward in the air. The moment the ancestral dragon supreme sword slashed out, the surrounding darkness was torn apart like a piece of paper. WH. What? The darkness was torn apart by the sword. Patriarch Yeming's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. He had been accumulating spiritual energy for half a day to use this move. It was enough to trap sovereigns of the heavenly mandate realm for a certain period of time. He was like a patriarch of the heart-tempering realm who was in the same realm as him. Once he was trapped, there was almost no chance for him to escape. However, the darkness was torn apart like a thin piece of paper by Chu Fengmian's sword. Die! Chu Fengmian's sword slashed through the darkness. With a sudden movement of his feet, he charged towards old ancestor Yiming. The sword in his hand moved again, and Patriarch Yeming's chest was penetrated by the sword. Patriarch Yeming was still struggling, trying to escape from Chu Fengmian's sword. However, a dragon roar resounded from the ancestral dragon supreme sword. A group of dragons appeared and devoured Patriarch Yeming's body, leaving only an empty ring that fell into Chu Fengmian's hand. The three patriarchs were all killed by Chu Fengmian with ease. The black mysterious sword formation gradually dissipated, and the 100,000 spiritual swords returned to Chu Fengmian's body. Chapter 858. Saint Mysterious Grass. North Sea Purified Water. Good, this scheme to kill the three patriarchs has indeed brought us countless benefits. After killing the three patriarchs, Chu Fengmian killed the three supervisor envoys as well. Then, he entered the void. In a palace in the void, Chu Fengmian sat inside and opened the empty rings of the three great ancestors. With a glance, he could see countless spiritual stones in the empty rings of the three great ancestors. Most of the spiritual stones were royal-grade spiritual stones. They were piled up like mountains. Many cultivators would go crazy if they saw such wealth and could not help but want to seize it. This wealth was even greater than the total wealth of some small sections. Even some sovereigns did not have such wealth. After all, these three great ancestors were members of the 7 great sects. They were extremely noble, and the wealth they had accumulated far exceeded that of ordinary great ancestors. However, this wealth was not in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Now, as long as Chu Fengmian was willing, he could condense endless spiritual stones. Spiritual stones were just a number to Chu Fengmian. What surprised him the most was that Chu Fengmian found a portion of sacred herbs in the empty rings of the three great ancestors. These sacred medicines were hidden in the deepest corners of the empty ring. It seemed that even the three patriarchs valued these sacred medicines very much. From this batch of sacred herbs, Chu Fengmian found Saint Mysterious Grass and North Sea Purified Water. These two sacred herbs were extremely rare among sacred herbs. They were necessary to refine the Du life-breaking pill. Even the Gu clan head could not buy these sacred herbs. Now that he found them in the empty rings of the three great ancestors, Chu Fengmian was naturally overjoyed. This also meant that Chu Fengmian was one step closer to collecting all the materials for the Du life-breaking pill. This is really a fortuitous encounter. Sacred herbs of this level are almost impossible to find outside. They are all in the hands of some great ancestors. No matter how much wealth you have, you can't buy them. It seems that there's no such opportunity. It's simply impossible to collect all the materials for the Du life-breaking pill. Chu Fengmian couldn't help but sigh. He had now realized how difficult it was to gather the ingredients for the Rain Du life-breaking pill. It was no wonder that those great ancestors and even rulers would need decades or even centuries to collect all of them. This was under the condition that Chu Fengmian's wealth was limitless. As long as there was a price, he could buy it. It was so difficult for him to collect it. The wealth of those great ancestors and rulers was far from being comparable to Chu Fengmian's. Those great ancestors and saints would even go bankrupt in order to collect materials for a saint-grade spirit pill. In comparison, Chu Fengmian's speed was much faster. In old ancestor Heavenly Spring's memory, there is indeed a batch of sacred elixirs in Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce. Chu Fengmian suddenly thought of something. He had killed old ancestor Heavenly Spring and seized his memory. From his memory, Chu Fengmian discovered that there was indeed a batch of sacred elixirs in the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce. However, the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce did not have all the sacred elixirs that Chu Fengmian needed, as old ancestor Heavenly Spring had said. After all, old ancestor Heavenly Spring had been bribed by the 3 supervisors at that time and was prepared to deal with Chu Fengmian. He said those words on purpose to make Chu Fengmian cooperate with him. However, there were indeed a few sacred elixirs that Chu Fengmian needed in the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce. There is no need for the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce to exist anymore. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered. Old ancestor Heavenly Spring was dead, so there was no need for the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce to exist anymore. Since they dared to deal with Chu Fengmian would let the world know the price for daring to deal with him. Chu Fengmian's figure moved and suddenly condensed a spatial tunnel. Then, he leaped into the spatial tunnel. The Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce was not located in Ningzhou Ancient City, but in a city called Heavenly Spring City. The entire Heavenly Spring City was under the jurisdiction of the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce. Although it was not as prosperous as Ningzhou Ancient City, it was still a slightly famous commercial city. As the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce grew bigger and bigger, the reputation of Heavenly Spring City also became more and more famous. In less than an hour, the sky outside Heavenly Spring City cracked open and a figure slowly walked out from it. Below Chu Fengmian's feet was an incomparably huge city. In the city, there was a cauldron of voices. Countless martial artists were doing business in the city. This was Heavenly Spring City. Chu Fengmian stood in the sky and looked at Heavenly Spring City. Suddenly, his mind moved and he directly grabbed at Heavenly Spring City with his palm. As the palm was thrown out, it immediately turned into an incomparably huge war dragon claw and blasted towards the sky above Heavenly Spring City. Above Heavenly Spring City, a huge array suddenly appeared when it sensed the aura of the war dragon claw. This was Heavenly Spring City's protective mountain array. However, in the next moment, the protective mountain array was forcefully torn apart by the war dragon claw. Rumble! As the protective mountain array was shattered, the entire Heavenly Spring City suddenly shook. In the blink of an eye, a figure had already descended in the sky above Heavenly Spring City. What's going on? What's going on? Someone is attacking Heavenly Spring City? In Sky Spring City, several old ancestors who had hidden themselves well suddenly felt the tremors in Sky Spring City, and they all showed themselves. In the next moment, they appeared above Heavenly Spring City and faced Chu Fengmian from afar. Who are you? Why are you attacking my Heavenly Spring City's protective mountain array? One of the old ancestors saw Chu Fengmian's figure and revealed shock in his eyes. Although Heavenly Spring City wasn't a big city in the central region, the protective mountain array was something that ordinary old ancestors couldn't tear apart. Originally, they had expected the person who attacked to be an extremely powerful old ancestor, someone who was famous in the central region. However, they didn't expect it to be a youth who didn't even seem to be 20 years old. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's cultivation was only at the life and death realm. A life and death realm martial artist suddenly tore apart their heavenly spring city's protective mountain array. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, this old ancestor wouldn't have believed that such a thing could happen. Chapter 859. In Sky Spring City, countless martial artists couldn't help but raise their heads and look at the sky. Although Sky Spring City had only been established for 1,000 years, no one had ever attacked it. Today, the mountain-protecting Grand Array was torn apart. It was enough to be the biggest event in Sky Spring City in 1,000 years. Chu Fengmian stood above Sky Spring City. His spiritual sense had already enveloped the entire city. With a glance, he could see that there were only 4 or 5 transcending life and death realm old ancestors. Among them, the strongest was only at the 6th step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm. To Chu Fengmian, it wasn't worth mentioning. "Who are you? Why did you tear apart the mountain-protecting Grand Array of my Sky Spring City?" An old ancestor of Sky Spring City saw that Chu Fengmian didn't answer his question and suddenly opened his mouth. "Although our Sky Spring City isn't a big force, we won't be bullied by anyone. Please give us an explanation." "Explanation? Old ancestor Sky Spring wanted to deal with me, but I killed him. From today onwards, there's no need for Sky Spring City to exist." Chu Fengmian's voice was extremely indifferent as he spoke. "And my identity? Remember, I'm Chu Fengmian." Chu Fengmian. Hearing this name, most of the martial artists were at a loss, as if they had never heard of this name. However, when some of them thought about it, their expressions changed abruptly. Chu Fengmian? This was the fierce person who had killed countless disciples of the 7 great sects in the returning ruined sky. He was someone who dared to confront the 7 great sections. Now, this figure was actually Chu Fengmian. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's words shocked them even more. The master of Sky Spring City, old ancestor Sky Spring, had actually gone to deal with Chu Fengmian. Moreover, he was killed by Chu Fengmian. Old ancestor Sky Spring was a heart-refining realm expert. How could he be killed by a life and death realm martial artist? How was this possible? Even if Chu Fengmian had torn apart the mountain-protecting Grand Array, his true strength was indeed much more frightening than his cultivation realm. However, there was still no martial artist who was willing to believe that such a thing could happen. "Kid, what nonsense are you talking about?" All of a sudden, one of the patriarchs shouted angrily at Chu Fengmian. "Chu Fengmian, I know you have an extremely arrogant personality. However, our Sky Spring City is not to be trifled with. How dare you slander our city lord? That's right. Do you think you're qualified to kill our city lord with your puny strength? What a joke! Chu Fengmian, hurry up and allow yourself to be captured. Otherwise, you won't have any chance once we make a move." The old ancestors in Sky Spring City roared angrily. None of them believed that Chu Fengmian had really killed old ancestor Sky Spring. After all, old ancestor Heavenly Spring was a famous figure in the entire central region. Even if he died, it was impossible for him to be killed by a life and death realm warrior like Chu Fengmian. Really? Looks like I can't be bothered to waste my breath on you. All of you, die! Chu Fengmian's eyes were incomparably cold. The ancestors and warriors in the Sky Spring City were all from the Sky Spring Chamber of Commerce. They were all subordinates of the old ancestor. Facing these people, Chu Fengmian would not have any mercy in his heart. Since he wanted to destroy the Sky Spring City today, he would naturally do as he said. Destroy. With a thought, Chu Fengmian condensed the power of the Battle Dragon art. Countless ancient Battle Dragon blood essence condensed and formed an incomparably huge ancient Battle Dragon in the air. This ancient Battle Dragon was 10,000 meters long. Following Chu Fengmian's order, one of the incomparably huge dragon claws slammed down. Rumble. Seeing Chu Fengmian make a move, the few old ancestors also condensed their spiritual energy and blocked the battle dragon claw. However, the spiritual energy they condensed was incomparably weak in front of the battle dragon claw. Almost in an instant, all of it was shattered. The few old ancestors who wanted to stop Chu Fengmian were sent flying by the power of the battle dragon claw. Their bodies were directly torn apart by the incomparably huge power in the void. They turned into a cloud of blood mist in the air and died on the spot. With this move, most of the old ancestors in the Sky Spring City died in the hands of Chu Fengmian. What's going on? Quickly run! When some of the warriors saw the old ancestors die, they were a little dazed. It was as if they could not imagine that such a scene would suddenly appear in front of them. However, there were even more cultivators who had already reacted. One after another, they activated their escape lights and fled from Sky Spring City. Who dares to cause trouble in my Sky Spring City? A figure suddenly woke up from the underground of the Sky Spring City. He turned into an escape light and flew towards Chu Fengmian. It was a white-haired old man. He was also the strongest person in the Sky Spring City. He was an old ancestor in the heart-refining realm. His strength was on par with old ancestor Sky Spring. Chief Consecrator. Seeing the appearance of the Chief Consecrator, some of the warriors in the Sky Spring City had hope in their eyes and shouted loudly. Chief Consecrator, it's Chu Fengmian who came to cause trouble in our Sky Spring City. Please take action and capture this man. Chu Fengmian? When the Chief Consecrator heard this name, his eyes flashed with surprise. He had heard of this name before. After all, in the 9 regions, it was extremely rare to see a disciple who dared to go against the 7 major sections. Especially when he was able to kill so many disciples of the 7 major sections. This meant that Chu Fengmian was not only arrogant, but also extremely powerful. The head consecrator looked at Chu Fengmian and sized him up. When he saw the ancient war dragon that was over 10,000 meters long, his eyes revealed a tinge of fear. Chu Fengmian, our Sky Spring City has no enmity with you. Why did you invade our Sky Spring City? The Chief Consecrator looked at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. No enmity? Chief Consecrator, others may not know about this, but you should know. Old ancestor Sky Spring has died in my hands. Do you think you can escape from this? Chu Fengmian looked at the Chief Consecrator and said calmly. I can give you a chance now. Destroy your cultivation and I will consider sparing your life. The Chief Consecrator was the second most powerful person in the Sky Spring Chamber of Commerce, just below old ancestor Sky Spring. His strength was even vaguely enough to contend with old ancestor Sky Spring. Others may not know that old ancestor Sky Spring wanted to deal with Chu Fengmian, but the Chief Consecrator knew about it. What was the point of pretending to be a fool now? Spare my life? Kid, don't be too arrogant. The Chief Consecrator's eyes flickered as he looked at Chu Fengmian and said coldly. Chapter 860. A Life and Death Struggle? Hearing the Great Deacon's words, Chu Fengmian revealed a mocking smile. Do you think you have the qualifications to fight to the death with this Chu? After Chu Fengmian finished speaking, he no longer had any intention of continuing the conversation with the Great Elder. With a thought, the battle dragon claw condensed once more. As the battle dragon claw descended from the sky, the Great Deacon's face revealed a trace of anger. As someone who had reached the 6th step of the life and death steps, the heart-refining realm, he had never been looked down upon by a life and death cultivator. He suddenly acted, and a surge of spiritual energy condensed into a 7-storied pagoda before him, blocking the battle dragon claw. A futile struggle. Chu Fengmian sneered, and the battle dragon claw ruthlessly descended, instantly destroying the 7-storied pagoda. The Great Deacon's body was enveloped by the battle dragon claw, and with a miserable shriek, his body was instantly obliterated by the battle dragon claw. Only a cloud of blood mist was left behind, which was completely devoured by Chu Fengmian. Great Deacon! The Great Deacon is dead. Countless cultivators below were dumbfounded as they watched the scene unfold before their eyes. Amidst their sluggishness, countless cultivators suddenly woke up and fled one after another. These cultivators of the Sky Spring Chamber of Commerce no longer had any thoughts of contending against Chu Fengmian, and all of them scattered in an instant. In the vast Sky Spring city, there was practically no one left. Chu Fengmian didn't pay any attention to those fleeing cultivators. With a move of his palm, the spatial rings of the cultivators he had just killed all fell into his hands. Each and every one of these old ancestors had some wealth, but in Chu Fengmian's eyes, this small amount of wealth was nothing in his eyes. Chu Fengmian's eyes looked towards the center of Sky Spring City, where an incomparably huge courtyard was. With a move of his body, he directly flew over. Arriving above the courtyard, Chu Fengmian stood in the air. The cultivators in the courtyard had long since fled, leaving behind an empty courtyard. Chu Fengmian condensed his spiritual energy and suddenly blasted the courtyard below with his palm. The entire courtyard was uprooted in Chu Fengmian's palm. It was directly grabbed by Chu Fengmian. A huge underground palace suddenly appeared under the courtyard and entered Chu Fengmian's sight. This underground palace was the location of the treasury of the Sky Spring Chamber of Commerce, which Luo Yunyang knew from the memories of the Divine Spring ancestor. In the entire Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce, only old ancestor Heaven Spring knew about the secret treasury. On the surface of the underground palace, there was an extremely complicated restriction. Other than ancestor Sky Spring, no one else could break it. However, Chu Fengmian didn't care about this small restriction at all. His mind flickered, and a sword light suddenly pierced out. Boom! The restriction of the underground palace was completely dissolved by the sword. Chu Fengmian waved his hand and the door of the underground palace opened. Behind the door, there were countless mountains of spiritual stones piled up. At a glance, there were at least tens of millions of spiritual stones piled up. Most of the spiritual stones weren't of a high grade. They were all middle grade and upper grade spiritual stones. Although Chu Fengmian didn't care about them, he still collected them. After all, he needed to spend some effort to condense wealth. This was also considered a fortune. After collecting the countless spiritual stones, Chu Fengmian directly opened the next treasury. This treasury was piled up with spiritual herbs. All kinds of spiritual herbs were piled up in it. Chu Fengmian glanced over and there was disappointment in his eyes. Most of these spiritual herbs were profound grade and earth grade spiritual herbs. Although there were a lot of them, they were useless to Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian still opened the empty ring and collected all the spiritual herbs in the treasury. Next was the third treasury, which contained some refining materials. Chu Fengmian did the same as before. He opened all of them and took them away. The wealth of these three treasury was more than the foundation of countless sections. The Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce had only been established for 1,000 years. It was already good enough that they had such a foundation. However, Chu Fengmian still wasn't satisfied. These riches were just worldly possessions to Chu Fengmian. Although they were valuable, they weren't of much use to him. Chu Fengmian came to destroy the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce for two reasons. First, he wanted to give the people of the 9 regions a warning. Second, he wanted to find the materials to refine the Dew life-breaking pill. The wealth of the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce wouldn't stop here. Chu Fengmian opened his spiritual consciousness and scanned the entire underground palace. Suddenly, he found that there was a hidden treasury in the depths of the underground palace. The treasure vault was extremely mysterious, and its aura was completely concealed by a formation, making it difficult for anyone to see it with a single glance. Chu Fengmian didn't notice the existence of this treasury when he first scanned it with his spiritual consciousness. Now, he found it after a careful search. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chu Fengmian's figure arrived in front of the treasury in an instant. He smashed the door of the treasury with his palm. Suddenly, countless medicinal fragrances assailed his nostrils. These medicinal fragrances were at least the fragrance of heaven-grade spiritual herbs. Among them, there were even many sacred herbs. Found it! Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with joy. This should be the treasury of the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce. There weren't many things in here. There were only 3 cabinets. On one of the cabinets, there were various kinds of spiritual herbs. Among these spiritual herbs, only some were heaven-grade spiritual herbs. Moreover, they were extremely precious among the heaven-grade spiritual herbs. Most of the remaining ones were sacred herbs. Some of them were ordinary sacred herbs, and some were even difficult to find in the 9 regions. Among them, there were 4 or 5 that Chu Fengmian needed. They were the necessary ingredients to refine the Do life-breaking pill. Good. Good. Destroy the Heavenly Spring Chamber of Commerce. Sure enough, there are some gains. Chu Fengmian's eyes were filled with excitement. After obtaining these sacred herbs, Chu Fengmian had almost finished preparing all the ingredients for the Do life-breaking pill. Chu Fengmian's mind moved. Almost without any hesitation, he looted everything in the treasury. In addition to spiritual herbs, there were also some spiritual weapons and heavenly wonders. They were all extremely valuable items. Many old ancestors who had transcended life and death would fight for them with their lives. There were many things that Chu Fengmian could use. Since he was here, he naturally had to loot everything. Chapter 861. The Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce was quite famous and developed well among the numerous new chambers of commerce in the central region. To be able to build a city, the Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce had already established a sect and started to steadily accumulate strength. If old ancestor Heaven Spring were to advance again in the future, once he stepped into the Heaven's Mandate realm, he would be able to call himself an emperor. The Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce would probably be ranked among the first-rate forces in the future. Unfortunately, old ancestor Heaven Spring was too greedy. Now that he had died in Chu Fengmian's hands, the Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce had also been completely destroyed by Chu Fengmian. I'm rich. I've made a fortune this time. Chu Fengmian was delighted after checking the wealth of the Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce. The enormous wealth of the Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce was now in Chu Fengmian's possession. If Chu Fengmian was willing, he could use his current wealth to establish another Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce. If he were to return to the northern region, the sect established by Chu Fengmian might not be able to stand on equal footing with the North Sea Academy and the Earth Demon sect, but it would still surpass countless martial arts families and become the 3rd most powerful force in the northern region. However, Chu Fengmian did not have such thoughts. Generally speaking, only warriors who had stabilized their realm and strength would choose to establish a sect to increase their strength. However, Chu Fengmian did not need that. He was still motivated. His goal was to be at the top of the 9 regions. Unless Chu Fengmian stepped into the top of the 9 regions, he would never choose to establish a sect. This time, I really have to thank old ancestor Heaven Spring. Chu Fengmian could not help but sigh. If old ancestor Heaven Spring had not attacked him, Chu Fengmian would not have found such an opportunity to rob the Heaven Spring Chamber of Commerce. He wanted to refine the Jade Dew Life Breaker elixir and most of the sacred herbs were already prepared. If he didn't have this opportunity, Chu Fengmian would have had to use countless methods. This time, he had taken a so-called shortcut. There was only one elixir left to refine the Jade Dew Life Breaker elixir. Jade Dew Sacred Fruit. Chu Fengmian muttered the name silently. This was the last remaining sacred herb. It was the most important sacred herb to refine the Jade Dew Life Breaker elixir, the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit. The Dew Sacred Fruit was a fruit of connate origin. It was the fruit of the first divine tree of the primordial era, the Builder Tree. The Builder Tree had been destroyed countless years ago. Only a few branches of the Builder Tree were left behind, just like what Chu Fengmian had obtained. However, although the divine Builder Tree had been destroyed, there were still some branches left behind. They were different from Chu Fengmian's divine Builder Tree. Among the branches of the Builder Tree that Chu Fengmian obtained, there was only the vitality of the Builder Tree, but there were no more young leaves. Back in the ancient times, when the divine Builder Tree was destroyed, there were still some young leaves on some of its branches. These branches were later obtained by others and grew into small divine trees. Although it couldn't be compared to the divine tree of Jianmu, it was still a supreme treasure of heaven and earth. There was a chance that the jade dew holy fruit would grow from these divine trees. At least in Chu Fengmian's memory, he knew that there was a place where a divine tree existed. On this divine tree, there was a jade dew sacred fruit. However, the location of the divine tree was an extremely dangerous place for Chu Fengmian. Desolate ancient sect. The location of the divine tree was within the desolate ancient sect. It could be said that the desolate ancient sect had risen because of this divine tree. Before the rise of the desolate ancient sect, the divine tree had always been the greatest secret of the desolate ancient sect. It couldn't be divulged and no one knew about it. After all, any leaf or branch that grew from a divine tree was a heavenly treasure that was of great use to martial artists. Whoever possessed the divine tree was equivalent to owning a huge treasure trove. Everyone wanted to obtain it and countless experts would go to plunder it. Therefore, no one knew about this until the desolate ancient sect became one of the 7 major sections. Some martial artists only knew about it. Now, the grudge between Chu Fengmian and the 7 major sects could be said to be irreconcilable. Moreover, even if Chu Fengmian didn't have any grudges, the 7 major sects would still view him as a mortal enemy with his current wealth. An ordinary man was innocent, but treasuring a jade ring would arouse the envy of others. This principle had always been acknowledged by the 9 regions. If Chu Fengmian went to the desolate ancient sect, it would be no different from a sheep entering a tiger's den. The desolate ancient sect's old ancestors were definitely countless times more than the Beimang Academy. Moreover, there were definitely more heavenly fate realm experts than the 7 major sections. If Chu Fengmian's identity was exposed, he would very likely be besieged by countless experts of the desolate ancient sect and fall into an extremely dangerous situation. However, in the entire 9 regions, Chu Fengmian knew that the only place that had the jade dew sacred fruit was the desolate ancient sect. If Chu Fengmian wanted to obtain the jade dew sacred fruit to refine the jade dew life breaker pill, he had no other choice. Looks like I can only go to the desolate ancient sect. Chu Fengmian's eyes flickered as he looked in the direction of the desolate ancient sect. It seemed like he had to make a trip to the desolate ancient sect. As long as he obtained the jade dew sacred fruit, he would be able to refine the jade dew life breaker pill. At that time, Chu Fengmian would be able to break through the life and death realm and step into the life breaker realm. Chu Fengmian's figure shuttled through the sky, flying above the clouds while observing his surroundings. Chu Fengmian was searching for the desolate ancient sect's location. In his previous life, Chu Fengmian had only heard of the desolate ancient sect's location. As for where it was, he had never been there. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had been flying above the clouds to search for the path. Chu Fengmian flew in the sky. His current appearance was completely different from before. It could even be said that he had been reborn. Chu Fengmian's appearance had changed to that of an ordinary man. His aura hadn't changed, and he was still at the peak of the life and death realm. However, he had concealed his powerful and terrifying spiritual energy. He didn't look much different from an ordinary peak life and death realm expert. Chu Fengmian didn't want to swagger into the desolate ancient sect. He was afraid that he would be killed by the experts there before he could obtain the jade dew sacred fruit. Therefore, he disguised himself as a genius martial artist from the Western region's N dynasty. With Chu Fengmian's current strength, even some heavenly fate realm experts wouldn't be able to see through his disguise. Therefore, he chose to take the risk and enter the desolate ancient sect. Chapter 862. Chu Fengmian flew towards the desolate ancient sect according to his memories from his previous life. Along the way, Chu Fengmian met many martial artists who were heading in the same direction as him. Obviously, these martial artists were also heading towards the desolate ancient sect. Chu Fengmian was not surprised. The desolate ancient sect was one of the 7 major sects. In the entire 9 regions, it was rare to meet a martial artist who had not heard of the desolate ancient sect. For countless martial artists in the 9 regions, joining one of the 7 major sects was their dream. Many talented martial artists would head to the desolate ancient sect to try their luck and see if they could become a disciple of the desolate ancient sect. After all, once one became a disciple of the desolate ancient sect, one would soar to the sky. Almost all the experts in the 9 regions would choose to curry favor with the disciples of the 7 major sects because of their high status. However, there were not many disciples who could pass the assessment of the desolate ancient sect. After all, the disciples of the 7 major sects strive for excellence. However, the reputation of the 7 great sects, as well as the resources within them, still attracted countless cultivators. Along the way, Chu Fengmian met at least tens of thousands of martial artists. This was only the tip of the iceberg. During the assessment of the desolate ancient sect every year, there would be millions or even tens of millions of martial artists participating. However, only a few thousand of them could pass the assessment. The assessment of 1 in 10,000 was even more cruel than the assessment of the Beimang Academy. The assessment of the Beimang Academy was 1 in 100. However, the assessment of the Beimang Academy required a quota. This meant that a portion of the martial artists had already been selected. However, the assessment of the desolate ancient sect did not require a quota. As long as there were disciples who had joined the 7 major sects, they could participate in the assessment. This should be near the desolate ancient city. Chu Fengmian looked at the huge city in front of him and thought to himself. This huge city was hundreds or thousands of times larger than the Ning Prefecture ancient city. This was the desolate ancient city, where the desolate ancient sect was located. It was considered one of the largest cities in the 9 regions. After all, the desolate ancient sect, one of the 7 major sects, was behind the desolate ancient city. In the city, almost any martial artist who walked around was considered a talented martial artist. There was a boiling cauldron of voices. Some of the martial artists walked around in groups. This was the first time Chu Fengmian had come to the ancient desolation city. The only way he could enter the city was to head to a nearby tea house. On the 2nd floor, he chose a seat by the window and sat down. Chu Fengmian only knew that there was a tree of God in the desolate ancient sect. However, he had no idea where the tree of God was or how he could obtain the jade dew sacred fruit. He wanted to get some good news before making his move. Otherwise, if he failed, it would be 1,000 times more difficult for Chu Fengmian to sneak in and get the jade dew sacred fruit. This time around, Chu Fengmian had sneaked into the desolate ancient sect. The experts of the desolate ancient sect wouldn't have expected this. This would make things much easier for Chu Fengmian. However, if Chu Fengmian was exposed once, the desolate ancient sect would definitely increase their vigilance. By then, it would be much more difficult to deal with Chu Fengmian. There was only one chance, and Chu Fengmian had to grasp this chance. The desolate ancient sect has been rising for 10,000 years. Now, the desolate ancient city has become so prosperous. Chu Fengmian looked out the window and couldn't help but sigh. The desolate ancient city had gradually become prosperous because of the rise of the desolate ancient sect. It could be said that the number of martial artists who came every year to join the desolate ancient sect was enough to support the prosperity of the desolate ancient city. The inn that Chu Fengmian was in was soon filled with people, and there weren't any seats left. "Sir, if you don't mind, could you let us sit together for a while?" While Chu Fengmian was looking out of the window and looking at the scenery of the desolate ancient city, a gentle and refined voice suddenly rang in Chu Fengmian's ears. Chu Fengmian turned around and saw that the person who spoke was a handsome young man. Beside him, there was a young lady. The lady looked slightly younger than the man, and the two of them looked somewhat similar. They looked like a pair of brother and sister. "Please take a seat." Chu Fengmian nodded. In this tea house, there weren't any seats left. Chu Fengmian was alone, so it was normal for someone to share a seat with him. "Thank you, sir." The young man nodded and expressed his gratitude to Chu Fengmian. The two of them sat across from Chu Fengmian and looked at each other. The two of them were at the peak of the life and death realm, which was very close to the strength that Chu Fengmian had displayed. To be able to possess such strength at such a young age, their backgrounds were definitely not bad. "I am Yi Zhan, and this is my sister, Yi. May I know how to address you?" Yizhan drank a cup of tea and slowly said to Chu Fengmian. Chu Bai. Chu Fengmian casually said. In his previous life, his name was Chu Jianbai. Now, he had removed the word sword and changed his name to Chu Bai. Chu was a big surname in the 9 regions. Even if the desolate ancient sect's disciples heard Chu Fengmian's name, they wouldn't suspect anything. Chu Bai? Yizhan repeated the name. After pondering for a moment, he slowly said. It seems like Brother Chu isn't from the central region. Oh? How do you know? Chu Fengmian casually said. It's just a guess. If there's someone like Brother Chu in the central region, it's impossible for you to be a nobody. Yizhan smiled and said. That's right. I'm from the west region. Chu Fengmian nodded. A peak life and death realm martial artist couldn't be a nobody. Especially with Chu Fengmian's age, he could be considered a genius. Although he couldn't be considered dazzling, it was impossible for him to be a nobody. Therefore, Chu Fengmian had thought of his identity from the start. The Western region. It seems that Brother Chu has come from afar for the trial of the Divine Tree. God Tree's trial? Hearing this, Chu Fengmian was a little surprised. This was the first time he heard of such a thing. However, it seemed like the Yi family's brother and sister were here for the God Tree's trial. Otherwise, they wouldn't have said the word too. That's right. Chu Fengmian nodded without batting an eyelid. Then, he suddenly asked. I originally came to the central region to train. When I heard that the God Tree's trial was near the ancient desolate city, I came to take a look. However, I don't know much about the God Tree's trial. I wonder if Brother Yi can explain it to me. Chu Fengmian originally thought that these martial artists were here to join the desolate ancient sect and participate in the desolate ancient sect's trial. Chapter 863. From Yizhan's words, Chu Feng could tell that many of the warriors were here for the Tree of God. On the phone, Brother Chu, you don't know? Sitting opposite Chu Fengmian, the younger sister of the Yi siblings, Yiya, asked in surprise. It could be said that most of the cultivators in the domain were aware of the Divine Tree's tempering. Many of the cultivators present had come because of the Divine Tree's tempering. Who would have thought that Chu Fengmian didn't know about it? Brother Chu is a warrior from the western region, so it's normal that you don't know about it. Most of the warriors here are from the domain region. Yizhan explained. The trial of the Divine Tree is an event that the desolate ancient sect has held in the past 100 years. Any martial artist in the 9 domains can participate and enter the Divine Tree mystic realm. There are countless treasures in the Divine Tree secret realm. As long as a warrior can pass the test, he or she can obtain the treasures. If a warrior obtains the treasures, the desolate ancient sect won't interfere. This is the reason why so many warriors are here. Yizhan smiled. The desolate ancient sect opened the Divine Tree secret realm? After Chu Fengmian heard Yizhan's words, a look of astonishment appeared in his eyes. 10,000 years ago, the Divine Tree secret realm was an absolute secret of the desolate ancient sect. Only the geniuses of the desolate ancient sect were qualified to enter. He didn't expect it to be open now. Moreover, as long as a warrior obtains the treasures, the desolate ancient sect won't interfere. With the character of the old fogies of the desolate ancient sect, they wouldn't do such a thing. If that's the case, won't the treasures in the Divine Tree secret realm be obtained by other warriors? Won't the desolate ancient sect interfere? Chu Fengmian asked in surprise. It's not that easy to obtain the treasures. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Yizhan smiled and said. Although there are many treasures in this Divine Tree secret realm, there are many more dangers than treasures. It's said that there are some hidden tree spirits. Many of these tree spirits have the strength of life and death realm. Some of them are even comparable to old ancestors. Once a warrior enters, he or she will be attacked by the tree spirits. Almost all the treasures are protected by the tree spirits. Therefore, if one wants to obtain the treasures, he or she must fight with the tree spirits. Basically, less than 1 in 10 warriors who enter the secret realm of the Divine Tree survive. Furthermore, less than 1 in 100 are able to reap some benefits. How can a sect like the ancient desolate sect give away its benefits for free? Yizhan slowly opened his mouth. According to the rumors, the number of tree spirits in the divine tree secret realm is increasing and the desolate ancient sect is unable to handle them. Therefore, they are using the treasures in the divine tree secret realm to attract martial artists. After hearing all this, Chu Fengmian nodded. Indeed, in his opinion, the ancient desolate sect would not do such a loss-making business. The divine tree was once a branch of the creation tree. The power it contained was self-evident. It was said that countless powerful beings in the world were born from the creation tree. Since the divine tree had inherited the power of the creation tree, it was not strange for it to give birth to tree spirits. If these tree spirits all had existences that surpassed the life and death old ancestor, then it was not hard to understand the ancient desolate sect's actions. Even to the ancient desolate sect, any old ancestor was extremely precious. If they died at the hands of the tree spirits, it would be painful for them for a period of time. Therefore, the ancient desolate sect was now using the treasures in the divine tree secret realm as bait to attract martial artists to deal with the tree spirits. Although they knew it was dangerous, the treasures in the divine tree secret realm still attracted countless fearless martial artists to enter in order to obtain a chance. Although this change had exceeded Chu Fengmian's expectations, it just so happened to be beneficial to him. If Chu Fengmian wanted to obtain the Jade Dew sacred fruit, he had to get close to the divine tree. If the divine tree was still the same as before, it would be much more difficult for Chu Fengmian to get close to it. In comparison, it was much easier for Chu Fengmian now. As long as he participated in the trial of the divine tree, he could also enter the divine tree secret realm. When the time came, it would be enough for him to search for the Jade Dew sacred fruit. Brother Chu, what's your decision? Do you want to participate in the trial of the divine tree? Yizhan saw that Chu Fengmian did not reply and thought that he had heard the danger. Thus, he smiled and asked. Although the treasures in the divine tree are tempting, it is not worth it if you have to sacrifice your life for it. After all, it is so dangerous. Brother Chu, you can think about it carefully. Since I'm already here, I naturally have to participate. Chu Fengmian nodded and said with a serious look in his eyes. I came to the domain land to train myself. Now that there is such a good opportunity, how can I let it go? Great. With Brother Chu accompanying us, we can be considered to have a friend in the divine tree secret realm. Yi looked at Chu Fengmian and said with a smile. It's useless. Once we enter the divine tree secret realm, it will be difficult for us to meet. All the martial artists who enter will be sent to different areas. It will be difficult to meet each other. Yizhan shook his head. Brother Chu, please be careful. The danger in the divine tree secret realm is not just the tree spirit. Chu Fengmian said in a low voice. Although the external dangers in such a secret realm were great, the greatest danger was the martial artists themselves. In any training ground, killing between martial artists was an extremely common thing. The divine tree secret realm was no exception. If you encounter any danger, just leave. Don't get involved. Yizhan turned his head and said to Yi. Don't worry, brother. Yi smiled as if she did not hear Yizhan's words at all. This made Yizhan's face show a little helplessness, but he did not say anything else. While they were talking, many of the martial artists in the tea house had already stood up and left the tea house. The entire tea house became much quieter. The trial of the divine tree is about to begin. Let's go. Yizhan packed up his things and walked out of the tea house. Chapter 864. Countless martial artists had already gathered around the square. At a glance, there were at least tens of thousands of people. Among these martial artists, most of them had already reached the life and death realm. There were even some divine force realm martial artists. It seemed like they were here to try their luck. As for old ancestors who had surpassed the life and death realm, although they were rare, Chu Fengmian could count at least a dozen of them. Moreover, there were also some peak life and death realm martial artists who had concealed their strength. Their strength might not be any weaker than ordinary old ancestors. Just like the Yi family's brother and sister beside Chu Fengmian. Their strength was probably much stronger than ordinary peak life and death realm martial artists. At the very least, they had the ability to contend against ordinary old ancestors. Possessing such strength at such a young age made Chu Fengmian suspect their identity. If they didn't have any background, it was impossible for them to do all this. However, Chu Fengmian couldn't be bothered to investigate. After all, the Yi family siblings were his friends and not his enemies. As long as they didn't go against him, he wouldn't find trouble with them. On the square, more and more martial artists had gathered. Almost all of them were here for the treasures in the Divine Tree's secret realm. Some of the desolate ancient sect's old ancestors had already appeared and stood before the crowd. Everyone has naturally come to the desolate ancient city for the Divine Tree secret realm. This Divine Tree trial has been held countless times. You should already know the specific rules. As long as you obtain the treasures, our desolate ancient sect will never seize them. They will all belong to you. However, anyone who enters the Divine Tree secret realm has their own fate. If you die, our desolate ancient sect won't be responsible. An old ancestor coldly spoke, explaining the rules. It didn't take long before he finished. Now, everyone, enter the teleportation array. Before you enter, you will receive a jade talisman. Crush the jade talisman and you will be teleported out of the Divine Tree secret realm. But remember, this jade talisman will take effect for 3 seconds when you crush it. You must crush it when there is no danger. Looking at the martial artists below nodding their heads, the old ancestor loudly spoke. All martial artists, set off. In front of the patriarch, a teleportation array was formed. Countless warriors walked into it one after another, and each of them received a jade talisman when they entered. Let's go too. Yi Kai said. Chu Fengmian and the siblings of the Yi family stepped into the teleportation array. While the patriarch was lecturing, Chu Fengmian also noticed that not all the martialists present were itinerant cultivators or even martialists from small forces. There were quite a number of disciples from the 7 major sections. It seemed like the treasures in the Divine Tree secret realm were extremely tempting. Even the disciples of the 7 great sects were not spared. They all wanted to enter and search for treasures. Chu Fengmian stepped into the teleportation array. Suddenly, Chu Fengmian felt a wave of spiritual awareness sweep over him. It seemed that the person wanted to find out Chu Fengmian's identity. The owner of this spiritual awareness was at least an emperor at the 7th step of the life and death steps, the heavenly fate realm. Chu Fengmian knew that this was the desolate ancient sect's inspection. The 7 major sects had many enemies in the 9 regions, especially now that the 6 demon gates had reappeared. The purpose of this inspection was to find out if there were any spies who had sneaked into the Divine Tree mystic realm. After all, the Divine Tree secret realm was the foundation of the desolate ancient sect. Even if the desolate ancient sect was open, they would not let anyone enter without checking. Originally, Chu Fengmian felt that it was strange that the desolate ancient sect would not check and let the martialists enter the teleportation array. Now, it seemed like the desolate ancient sect was deliberately misleading the martialists into entering the teleportation array and letting their guard down. Only then would they be able to inspect properly. It was impossible for the martialists present to resist the spiritual awareness of an emperor. However, that was only for the others. For Chu Fengmian, not to mention an emperor, even someone at the peak of the 9 regions might not be able to inspect his body. Chu Fengmian's spiritual awareness, having lived 2 lives as a human, was extremely tenacious. With a thought, Chu Fengmian hid all his secrets and only displayed less than 1% of his strength. After letting the spiritual awareness scan him, it did not linger on Chu Fengmian for too long and left. Not long after, the world in front of Chu Fengmian began to spin. The various scenes around him also began to become misty. In the next moment, Chu Fengmian left the teleportation array and entered the Divine Tree's secret realm. Chaotic aura, it feels so ancient. The moment Chu Fengmian took a step into the Divine Tree's secret realm, he could feel the countless chaotic auras around him. This place, the Divine Tree's secret realm, should be a broken continent left behind from ancient times. That was why it contained so much chaotic aura. Later on, it was discovered by the desolate ancient sect and was transformed into the Divine Tree's secret realm. After all, the Divine Tree was a branch of the Creation Tree and used chaotic aura as nutrients. All these treasures should have been born from the primal chaos aura. At a glance, the surroundings of the Divine Tree's secret realm felt as if they had returned to the desolate ancient era. They had returned to the desolate ancient era. Everywhere was incomparably ancient. This should be the periphery of the Divine Tree's secret realm. There is still a long way to go before I reach the Divine Tree. Chu Fengmian sensed the various things around him and found that the aura of the Divine Tree was still very far away from where he was now. Obviously, the place where Chu Fengmian was first transmitted to was the periphery of the Divine Tree's secret realm. The Jade Dew sacred fruit would only grow at the top of the Divine Tree. If Chu Fengmian wanted to find the Jade Dew sacred fruit, he would have to go directly to the Divine Tree. Chu Fengmian instantly determined the direction of the Divine Tree. With a move, he turned into a ray of light and flew directly in the direction of the Divine Tree. The Divine Tree's secret realm was incomparably huge. Chu Fengmian traveled continuously for half an hour. Through his spiritual awareness, he could vaguely see an incomparably huge tree. This huge tree pierced through the heavens and the earth. It was almost impossible to see the top, as if the top had already surpassed the world. Chapter 865. This is the sacred tree. It was also Chu Fengmian's first time seeing the sacred tree with his own eyes. Even in countless legends and ancient books, he had heard countless times about the size of the sacred tree. Today, Chu Fengmian was also shocked. Unparalleled. Chu Fengmian had never thought that a tree could grow so big. A towering tree. Moreover, the sacred tree was only a branch of the former builder tree. Compared to the real builder tree, it was only a drop in the ocean. How big is the legendary builder tree that enveloped the entire ancient Barrens continent? Chu Fengmian couldn't help but mutter to himself. In the records, the builder tree was so big that it enveloped the entire ancient Barrens continent. Several branches of the builder tree could be seen anywhere in the ancient Barrens continent. When one raised his head, all he could see was the crown of the builder tree. When the builder tree was shattered, the ancient Barrens continent lost its support. Therefore, it was fragmented later. After seeing the sacred tree in front of him, Chu Fengmian couldn't help but think of the majestic builder tree in the past. Just when Chu Fengmian was still sighing at the size of the sacred tree, a wave of spiritual energy suddenly appeared in front of Chu Fengmian. In the chaotic aura in front of him, a wave of spiritual energy suddenly condensed from nothingness. Then, it directly transformed into a human figure. The moment this human figure condensed, it suddenly blasted a palm towards Chu Fengmian. The condensation of this human figure was almost silent. If it weren't for Chu Fengmian's divine pulse, he could clearly feel the changes in the surrounding spiritual energy. Only then would he discover the abnormality. Otherwise, Chu Fengmian wouldn't have noticed the condensation of this human figure. This is the tree spirit? Chu Fengmian had already heard that the existence of the tree spirit in this divine tree secret realm was extremely strange. It would condense silently and suddenly launch an attack on warriors. In this divine tree secret realm, the chaotic aura was enough to block the spiritual consciousness of warriors. Therefore, the condensation of the tree spirit was almost impossible to notice. The tree spirit in front of him only had the strength of the 4th or 5th level of the divine power realm. However, if it really appeared suddenly, ordinary life and death realm warriors wouldn't be able to react. If he were to be ambushed at that time, he would at least be seriously injured. Moreover, it was said that there were life and death realm and even old ancestor-level existences among the tree spirits. If these tree spirits could be formed silently and used for sneak attacks, then ordinary patriarchs would most likely perish in the divine tree secret realm. It was no wonder that the death rate in the Divine Tree's secret realm was so high. 90% of the warriors who entered would only end up dead. The tree spirit was indeed difficult to deal with. Let me see what this tree spirit is. Chu Fengmian's mind flickered, and the spiritual energy of the tree spirit's palm dissipated in front of Chu Fengmian. He waved his hand, and the tree spirit was caught in his palm. Such pure spiritual energy. The tree spirit's spiritual energy is purer than countless spiritual pills. Chu Fengmian could not help but sigh as he felt the pure spiritual energy of the tree spirit. The tree spirit was simply an amalgamation of pure spiritual energy. Such an existence could only be born in the divine tree. Chu Fengmian's mind flickered, and he devoured all of the tree spirit's spiritual energy. He could feel that the tree spirit's spiritual energy was different from ordinary spiritual energy. It contained a part of the divine tree's power. Once devoured, it would not only increase a warrior's strength, but also strengthen their body. To Chu Fengmian, the power of a tree spirit was negligible. However, if he could devour a large number of tree spirits, his body would become even tougher. Let's go! Chu Fengmian's body flickered, and he flew toward the divine tree once again. The appearance of the tree spirit reminded Chu Fengmian that the divine tree's secret realm was no less dangerous than the 9 regions' ominous lands. Chu Fengmian had to be extremely careful when exploring alone. If Chu Fengmian encountered a tree spirit with the strength of an ancestor, and he was not aware of it, he could be seriously injured, or even killed. It seems that no matter what strength one has, one will encounter danger in the divine tree's secret realm. I can only be extremely cautious. Chu Fengmian focused all of his attention on the divine pulse. The divine pulse could sense the changes in the surrounding spiritual energy. Although the spiritual energy fluctuations of the tree spirits were slight, they still could not escape the divine pulse's senses. Chu Fengmian came to the divine tree's secret realm with the help of the divine pulse, so it was easier for him than ordinary warriors. However, Chu Fengmian still could not let down his guard. Chu Fengmian flew along the way, and he saw many warriors' corpses. Their empty rings were still intact, but the essence blood in their bodies had been completely sucked dry. Needless to say, all of this was done by the tree spirits. For the tree spirits, the warrior's blood essence was their best nourishment. Therefore, these tree spirits would gather and attack the warriors. And if the ancient martial art practitioners attacked, then these empty rings would naturally not be left behind. Chu Fengmian's figure slowly descended and arrived beside the warrior's corpse. With a wave of his hand, the empty ring was caught in his palm. However, the moment Chu Fengmian grabbed the empty ring, countless spiritual energy fluctuations suddenly appeared in the surroundings. 5 or 6 tree spirits appeared beside Chu Fengmian and charged at him. These 5 or 6 tree spirits seemed to have been hiding around the warrior's corpse from the beginning, waiting for their prey. This empty ring was the bait. And Chu Fengmian was their prey. Oh! Seeing this scene, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed some surprise. He did not expect these tree spirits to know how to set up traps. Originally, Chu Fengmian thought that these tree spirits were existences without consciousness. He did not expect them to know how to set up traps. These 5 or 6 tree spirits were around the first level of life and death realm. The closer they were to the divine tree, the stronger the tree spirit's strength would be. If they launched a sneak attack together, even a peak life and death realm warrior would find it extremely troublesome. The moment Chu Fengmian picked up the empty ring, these 5 or 6 tree spirits suddenly attacked. They wanted to take advantage of Chu Fengmian's most relaxed moment to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 866. Although this method was effective against other warriors, it was meaningless against Chu Fengmian. The moment the spiritual energy hit Chu Fengmian's body, a dragon's roar suddenly erupted from Chu Fengmian's body. It completely shattered this wave of spiritual energy. You're courting death. Chu Fengmian turned his head. His eyes were extremely cold. A wave of spiritual energy condensed in Chu Fengmian's palm and suddenly swept over. Chu Fengmian's palm struck out. The spiritual energy directly turned into a storm and swept over. Under this palm, the tree spirits were all crushed and turned into pure spiritual energy, which was directly devoured by Chu Fengmian. It seems that these tree spirits have learned some tactics in their battles with the warriors. These tree spirits were much more difficult to deal with than Chu Fengmian had imagined. Their figures were extremely mysterious. Although Chu Fengmian had the divine pulse, he could only sense the tree spirits when they condensed their spiritual energy. If the tree spirits were hiding beside Chu Fengmian, then Chu Fengmian would not be able to find them. This divine tree secret realm is really strange. I'd better get the Jade Dew sacred fruit as soon as possible. Chu Fengmian stopped thinking about it. His current goal was to get the Jade Dew sacred fruit. He did not want to care about the various things in the divine tree secret realm. Chu Fengmian's figure moved again and directly flew in the direction of the divine tree. Along the way, Chu Fengmian did not pay attention to the conflicts he encountered. He flew in the direction of the divine tree with all his strength. After a few hours, the divine tree in Chu Fengmian's eyes finally became incomparably huge. He was much closer to the divine tree. The closer he got to the divine tree, the more Chu Fengmian felt the astonishing vitality emitted from the divine tree. It could be said that the divine tree was an almost immortal existence. Even if it was broken, it would probably be able to recover in an instant. The vitality of the divine tree could be said to be 1,000,000 times, or even 10 million times that of a warrior. With such an abnormal vitality, it almost meant that it was an immortal existence. If anyone could plunder the power of the divine tree, they would probably become the most terrifying figure in the 9 regions. However, although the sacred tree appeared to be extremely calm, the aura emitted from its body was extremely terrifying. Even Chu Fengmian would fall if he angered the divine tree. It was just that the divine tree usually had no intention of attacking. It had always been accumulating its own power and did not have its own consciousness. It would not attack martialists. Otherwise, the desolate ancient sect would have long been destroyed by the divine tree instead of being used by the ancient sect. The Jade Dew sacred fruit is on the crown of this divine tree. Chu Fengmian came to the edge of the divine tree and suddenly raised his head. His figure soared into the sky and turned into a beam of light, flying directly into the sky. The height of the divine tree was simply unimaginable. It pierced through the clouds, and Chu Fengmian's escape light penetrated through the clouds countless times. Along the way, Chu Fengmian also discovered many warriors. They seemed to have the same thoughts as Chu Fengmian. They all wanted to charge towards the treetop of the divine tree. The Jade Dew sacred fruit was not only enough to refine the Jade Dew life breaker elixir, but also the ability to break through the bottleneck of a martial artist. Although the effect was not as strong as the Jade Dew life breaker elixir, it was still a fatal attraction to countless warriors. Chu Fengmian glanced over and saw a group of warriors beside him. There were a total of 6 of them, and they all wore the same clothes. They seemed to be a group of warriors. Although Chu Fengmian did not recognize the group of warriors, it was obvious that they had teamed up to explore the Divine Tree Secret Realm. The Divine Tree Secret Realm was filled with dangerous people. If one explored it with other warriors, the risk would naturally be reduced. Therefore, many warriors chose to form groups and explore it together. Chu Fengmian was not surprised to encounter a group of warriors here. It should be known that every time the Divine Tree Secret Realm opened, there would be tens of thousands of warriors entering. Most of these people's target was the Divine Tree. Therefore, it was not rare to encounter warriors around the Divine Tree. There's actually someone here? He dares to explore the Divine Tree Secret Realm alone? The moment Chu Fengmian noticed the group of warriors, these warriors also noticed Chu Fengmian's existence. Their eyes flickered as they sized up Chu Fengmian. His strength is not bad. Peak life and death realm. Since this lad is exploring alone and has survived until now, he must have had a great fortuitous encounter. Let's subdue this lad first. Exploring the Divine Tree Secret Realm is full of danger. Subdue this lad and let him help us explore as a slave. This conversation was completed in an instant. Suddenly, several pairs of eyes looked towards Chu Fengmian. Sir, please wait. The figures of these warriors suddenly approached Chu Fengmian and besieged him. Sir, exploring the Divine Tree's secret realm alone is still a little dangerous. Why don't you cooperate with us to explore the Divine Tree's secret realm? A martialist sneered as he looked at Chu Fengmian. As long as you are obedient, we will not do anything to you. Cooperate? How can we cooperate? Chu Fengmian sneered when he heard the warrior's words. Although they were using their spiritual senses to converse, ordinary martial artists could not hear them at all. But to Chu Fengmian, how could their conversation escape Chu Fengmian's ears? Chu Fengmian naturally knew the thoughts of these martial artists clearly. Chu Fengmian did not expect that these warriors would treat him as prey in the Divine Tree's secret realm instead of hunting other warriors. A kind person would be bullied. This principle was indeed applicable everywhere. Oh? It's simple. You will come with us and help us explore the path in front. We will follow you from behind. The warrior said with a smile. What do you think, sir? Is that so? So, you're here to use me as a shield? Chu Fengmian's lips curled into a playful smile as he said with a smile. I didn't expect you to be so tactful. That's right, we'll let you be our shield. If you do a good job and don't die, we'll share some of the treasures with you. It's not impossible. Another venerable one said coldly as he looked at Chu Fengmian. Chapter 867. I'm not interested. Chu Fengmian said casually. Is that so? Chu Fengmian's direct refusal was also unexpected to those warriors. The strength of this group of warriors was around the peak of life and death realm. They came to the Divine Tree's secret realm to look for an opportunity to break through. 6 against 1. Under such circumstances, there was almost no other choice. They had already spoken so clearly. Yet, Chu Fengmian still refused them without the slightest hesitation. Kid, you don't have the qualifications to refuse, do you understand? You still want to leave? Let's see if you still have the ability to leave. A warrior fiercely said to Chu Fengmian. Seeing that you're quite sensible, I originally wanted to give you a way out, but I didn't expect you to be so stupid. But it doesn't matter. I'll subdue you first and turn you into a slave. The moment he opened his mouth, countless amounts of spiritual energy suddenly appeared beside Chu Fengmian and formed a magic array. Chu Fengmian's body was trapped in the array. If you ask me, we don't need to talk nonsense with this kid. Just subdue him and make him our slave, so we don't have to waste our breath. Another woman said in a vicious tone. Sigh, I originally wanted to let you guys go this time, but I didn't expect you to be so stupid. You think you can deal with me with just a bunch of trash? As Chu Fengmian spoke, his face changed, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He originally wanted to give this group of warriors a chance, but since they didn't cherish it, there was no need to waste his breath. All of you, die! When Chu Fengmian spoke, his aura was completely different from before. Just a moment ago, Chu Fengmian's aura was no different from an ordinary peak life and death realm martial artist. But now, Chu Fengmian's aura was several times more terrifying than before. He's hiding his strength. What a terrifying aura. Who is this kid? The moment these warriors felt the change in Chu Fengmian's aura, their faces changed, and they no longer had that relaxed expression. Don't think too much about it. Anyway, it doesn't matter how strong this kid is. After all, he is a life and death realm martial artist. With the 6 of us joining hands, killing him will be as easy as flipping our hands. The woman spoke again. Her tone was extremely vicious. Once we kill her, extract her soul, and refine it, we'll naturally know who she is. Extracting souls and refining them? Chu Fengmian said coldly upon hearing the woman's words. Very well, it seems like you like this method very much. Since that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish. Boom! Chu Fengmian's body moved. The moment his body moved, he disappeared from where he stood. This sudden disappearance caused the gazes of the martialists to flicker involuntarily as they searched for the location. However, the next moment, they were met with a miserable shriek. The woman's chest was pierced through by a palm. Then, the woman's body was shattered by the palm. Chu Fengmian grabbed a transparent soul from the broken body and held it in his hand. A ball of golden dragon flame ignited in Chu Fengmian's palm. Ah! The woman's ear-piercing wail directly entered the ears of the martialists present. Damn it! Kill this kid! Kill! When the other warriors saw that the woman had died in Chu Fengmian's hands, their faces were filled with rage. They were furious to the extreme. Countless martial skills fell from the sky and bombarded Chu Fengmian. These martialists had obviously known each other for a long time. They joined hands to deal with Chu Fengmian. Their martial skills were combined in an orderly manner. It seemed like it would take a long time for them to achieve this. The 5 of them joined hands and unleashed countless martial skills. Even an ordinary ancestor would have to retreat when facing such power. However, Chu Fengmian didn't care at all. His expression didn't change at all. A battle dragon claw condensed above his head and bombarded the 5 martialists. The battle dragon claw struck out in the sky and caused a shock. Suddenly, the martial skills that the 5 martialists had condensed were crushed by the battle dragon claw. The vibrating spiritual energy struck the chests of the 5 cultivators, causing them to be sent flying. Chu Fengmian waved his hand again, and a gust of spiritual energy shot out into the air. It transformed into a violent storm in the air, and directly engulfed the 5 warriors. Their bodies were drawn into the storm, and all of them were forcibly torn apart. All of their empty rings fell into Chu Fengmian's hands. Chu Fengmian found more than 20 empty rings from the 5 martialists. The owners of these empty rings were obviously not them. He didn't know that these martialists had killed many other martialists before this. However, this time, they were unlucky to have provoked Chu Fengmian. However, when Chu Fengmian was about to collect their blood essence, a sudden change occurred. After the blood essence of these martialists scattered in the air, it all disappeared. Chu Fengmian felt that the blood essence seemed to have been directly collected by an existence. Something is strange. Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a bit of surprise. It wasn't impossible for any martialist to snatch food from the tiger's mouth from Chu Fengmian's hands. However, if any martialist wanted to do all this, Chu Fengmian would definitely know. It was just a question of whether Chu Fengmian had the ability to stop this. However, this time, the blood essence of these martialists had been collected without Chu Fengmian noticing. This kind of silent effect was most likely tree spirit. Only the tree spirit of the divine tree secret realm could do all this. Or perhaps, it was the divine tree itself? Chu Fengmian's mind moved. He suddenly scanned the surroundings and saw that there seemed to be many tree roots hidden in the surrounding chaotic aura. These tree roots were usually hidden in the chaotic aura. It was very difficult for martialists to notice them. On these tree roots, one could actually vaguely feel some blood essence. It was the blood essence of the martialists that Chu Fengmian had just killed. This divine tree has been swallowing the blood essence all this time? Chu Fengmian spread out his consciousness again and shrouded the surroundings of the divine tree. He noticed that the surroundings of the divine tree, no, the entire divine tree secret realm, were densely packed with invisible roots. As long as a martialist died, all of their blood essence would be collected by the divine tree. Chapter 868. The Tree of God is absorbing spiritual energy in such a frenzied manner. Chu Fengmian observed for a full 5 minutes before he finally stopped. He originally thought that the Tree of God was only devouring blood essence. But now, it seemed that the Tree of God wasn't just devouring blood essence, but also spiritual energy. The Tree of God was one of the branches of the Builder Tree. With its vitality, it didn't need to devour any spiritual energy to live forever. It was a near-immortal existence. He didn't expect the Tree of God to be devouring spiritual energy in such a frenzied manner. The Tree of God absorbed the blood essence of the warriors who died in the Tree of God's domain. Everything was out of the ordinary. In particular, the appearance of these tree spirits was almost illusory. They were born without any signs. Chu Fengmian was also puzzled at the appearance of these tree spirits. But now, it seemed that these tree spirits were most likely created by the tree of God. The divine tree had created these tree spirits in order to borrow the tree spirit's strength to kill warriors and devour their blood essence. At least, most of the warriors in the tree of God's domain had died in the hands of the tree spirits. This made Chu Fengmian even more suspicious. Chu Fengmian even faintly felt that all of this had something to do with the desolate ancient sect. This was because the opening of the divine tree's secret realm was initiated by the desolate ancient sect. Now that the tree of God had gathered tree spirits and was massacring in the divine tree's secret realm, Chu Fengmian felt that all of this was done intentionally by the desolate ancient sect. Indeed, the opening of the divine tree's secret realm is out of the ordinary. The desolate ancient sect wouldn't allow people to enter and benefit from it for no reason. Chu Fengmian thought to himself. He didn't expect to encounter such an unusual event in the divine tree's secret realm. But now that the tree of God was devouring spiritual energy in such a frenzied manner, there must be something hidden within. To Chu Fengmian, this wasn't a bad thing. As long as it was related to the tree of God, it wouldn't be a small matter. Moreover, Chu Fengmian could vaguely guess that the desolate ancient sect's goal was to completely control the tree of God. If the desolate ancient sect had always wanted to use the tree of God to expand, they wouldn't have done this. It was very likely that the desolate ancient sect felt that the time was ripe and wanted to take control of the divine tree. Apart from this, there was no other reason for the desolate ancient sect to do such a thing. Anyone who can obtain the power of the divine tree will stand at the top of the 9 regions. Since the desolate ancient sect wants to control the divine tree, why don't I interfere? I might be able to benefit from it. Chu Fengmian pondered and quickly came up with a plan. The desolate ancient sect was one of Chu Fengmian's greatest enemies. Even if he couldn't benefit from it this time, it was worth it for him to destroy the desolate ancient sect's plan. Chu Fengmian's body moved again and continued to fly toward the canopy above. This treetop was the core of the divine tree, and it was because of this that the Du's sacred fruit grew in the treetop. As long as Chu Fengmian could reach the treetop, he would be able to observe the reason for the change in the divine tree and the desolate ancient sect's plan. Along the way, Chu Fengmian encountered many warriors. However, as long as these warriors did not provoke Chu Fengmian ignored them all. After all, with Chu Fengmian's wealth, these life and death realm martial artists, and even some old ancestors, were nothing in his eyes. Chu Fengmian couldn't be bothered to go on a killing spree. Right now, his goal was the divine tree and the Du's sacred fruit. The Du's sacred fruit was Chu Fengmian's goal in the divine tree's secret realm. However, there were some martial artists who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. When they saw Chu Fengmian by himself, they wanted to attack him. Chu Fengmian didn't have any mercy for these people. He killed them all easily. Chu Fengmian's current strength was close to the sovereigns. If he used the Sword Sovereign Palace, those sovereigns of the heavenly fate realm wouldn't be able to kill him. Therefore, Chu Fengmian didn't encounter any danger along the way. Gradually, the treetop became bigger and clearer. Chu Fengmian had already pierced through the clouds. Above the clouds was a chaotic void. Apart from the treetop of the divine tree, there was almost nothing else. Go! The closer he got to the treetop, the greater the pressure Chu Fengmian felt. However, Chu Fengmian didn't have the slightest intention to retreat. He condensed his spiritual power, and his speed increased countless times as he rushed up. Bam! In the next moment, Chu Fengmian's body arrived at the treetop. There's actually someone on the treetop? The moment Chu Fengmian rushed up to the treetop, he felt countless auras. There seemed to be many martial artists on the treetop. As he looked around, he saw that there were at least a few dozen cultivators. These dozens of people were divided into different forces. They were all united, and there were a total of 6 forces. There's actually someone rushing up. Oh? He's actually alone? The moment Chu Fengmian rushed up to the treetop, countless spiritual consciousnesses swept towards Chu Fengmian. When they saw that Chu Fengmian was alone, these martial artists couldn't help but look over with some surprise in their eyes. To rush up to the treetop, one had to endure extremely great pressure. When they rushed up, they all joined forces and rushed up. Now that Chu Fengmian was rushing up alone, it naturally attracted their attention. Desolate Ancient Sect, Ancient Moon Canyon, Medicine King Valley, Tianjian Sect. Chu Fengmian glanced over and saw martial artists from 4 of the forces. They were from these 4 sections. The remaining 2 forces didn't originate from the 7 major sects, but were formed by the union of some genius martial artists from smaller sections. These 6 forces were all on the treetop. They seemed to be in a stalemate, and also seemed to be waiting for something. However, when Chu Fengmian's gaze swept across the treetop, he quickly understood what they were waiting for. In the center of the treetop, on a branch, a purple fruit the size of a fist could be seen clearly. This purple fruit was covered with extremely complex patterns, and it contained a terrifying amount of spiritual power. The Jade Dew Sacred Fruit. This was the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit born by the creation tree. At this moment, the patterns on the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit seemed to be incomplete. This meant that the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit had yet to fully mature. Chapter 869. Above the treetop, the 6 factions were in a deadlock because of the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit. The Jade Dew Sacred Fruit could not only be used to refine the Jade Dew life-breaking pill, but it could also allow the majority of peak life and death experts to break through. In the history of the 9 regions, there was no lack of extremely talented geniuses who were stuck at the peak of life and death realm. Even after using countless methods, they were still unable to break through. The heavens were fair. Generally, the more talented a martial artist was, the more difficult it would be for them to break through. For example, some monstrous geniuses had the ability to kill old ancestors at the peak of life and death realm. However, if they wanted to transcend life and death and break through, it would be dozens or even hundreds of times more difficult than ordinary martial artists. These monstrous geniuses could not break through, but with the help of the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit, they could easily break through life and death and step onto the life and death steps. The value of a Jade Dew Sacred Fruit was sky high in the outside world. For Chu Fengmian, the difficulty of transcending life and death was thousands or even tens of thousands of times more difficult than ordinary life and death experts. It was impossible for Chu Fengmian to break through with his own strength. Therefore, he wanted to refine Saint-grade spirit pills, Jade Dew life-breaking pill, to defy the heavens. Chu Fengmian looked at the surrounding martial artists and saw that they had already known about the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit's ripening. Therefore, they had rushed to the treetop from the start and remained in a deadlock because the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit had yet to ripen. Fortunately, the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit had yet to ripen, which allowed Chu Fengmian to rush over. Looking at the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit's appearance, it would not take long for it to ripen completely. If Chu Fengmian had delayed a little longer, he might not have been able to reach the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit's ripening. At that time, Chu Fengmian would have wanted to cry, but no tears would come out. There was only one Jade Dew Sacred Fruit in the entire divine tree. The value of the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit was self-evident. At the very least, all the martial artists present were looking at the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit with burning eyes. Even some old ancestors were the same. To these patriarchs, this Jade Dew Sacred Fruit might not be of any help to them, but it was enough to exchange for an astronomical amount of wealth. Obtaining the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit was equivalent to obtaining a huge treasure. Who would want to give it up? This brat actually managed to rush up alone. Looks like he does have some strength. While Chu Fengmian was pondering, the gazes of those warriors were already sizing Chu Fengmian up. There was hostility and surprise. They were all discussing with each other. The fact that he was able to rush up to the top of the tree by himself had indeed surprised them. However, most of the gazes were filled with disdain. It was as if they did not put Chu Fengmian in their eyes at all. The appearance of a single cultivator was of no threat to these forces. After all, no matter how strong an honorable martial artist was, how strong could he be? Among the 6 great forces, there was no lack of patriarchs who had transcended life and death. Chu Fengmian's cultivation base was merely at the peak of life and death realm. They had never placed him in their eyes. Everyone, this divine tree belongs to our desolate ancient sect. This jade dew sacred fruit should also belong to our desolate ancient sect. In this stalemate, one of the desolate ancient sect's patriarchs suddenly spoke. Everyone, please leave. Oh? Old ancestor Baron Cloud, aren't the rules of the divine tree trial set by your desolate ancient sect? All the treasures obtained in the divine tree's secret realm belong to whoever obtains them. Just as the old ancestor Baron Cloud finished speaking, a mocking voice rang out. Among the warriors beside him, an old ancestor from the Tianjian sect sneered. Your desolate ancient sect wants to make us leave with just a few words? How is that possible? If you want us to leave, sure. As long as you hand over the jade dew sacred fruit to our Tianjian sect, we'll leave the divine tree's secret realm obediently. How about it? The words of the Tianjian sect's old ancestor caused the old ancestor Baron Cloud's face to darken. Hand over the jade dew sacred fruit? In the divine tree's secret realm, the most valuable treasure was the jade dew sacred fruit. With the jade dew sacred fruit, the Tianjian sect's disciples would naturally return with a full load. What else was there to talk about? Old ancestor Baron Cloud, you don't have to waste your energy. This jade dew sacred fruit belongs to whoever is capable. Among the warriors from the Valley of the Medicine Masters, an old ancestor also spoke up. But before that, everyone, it's better to get rid of this brat first. The old ancestor of the Valley of the Medicine Masters suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed at Chu Fengmian. This brat is alone. He doesn't have the right to compete with us for the jade dew sacred fruit. Let's knock him down from the treetop first, lest he tries to fish in troubled waters. The old ancestor of the Valley of the Medicine Masters was a middle-aged man. He didn't look old, but he had become an old ancestor at such a young age. Naturally, he was one of the geniuses of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. He looked at Chu Fengmian with disdain. Brat, know your place. This jade dew sacred fruit isn't something you can get your hands on. Get lost now. Oh? Chu Fengmian stood where he was. He didn't expect the people from the Valley of the Medicine Masters to come looking for trouble with him. Now that the 6 factions were in a deadlock, no one dared to make the first move. But now that Chu Fengmian was alone and standing there, he was a classic example of a pushover. It seemed that the people from the Valley of the Medicine Masters wanted to make an example out of Chu Fengmian. The warriors from the other factions also fell silent when they heard the old ancestor of the Valley of the Medicine Masters speak. This action was a tacit agreement with the old ancestor of the Valley of the Medicine Masters. The 6 factions were here to compete for the jade dew sacred fruit. Chu Fengmian was alone and didn't have the right to stand beside them and compete with them. If Chu Fengmian didn't make a move, everyone would really think of him as a pushover and want to take advantage of him. Trash from the Valley of the Medicine Masters, you want me to get lost? Do you think you have the right to do so? Chu Fengmian sneered. 6 factions? Chu Fengmian didn't think much of the 6 factions combined. It was just that the jade dew sacred fruit wasn't ripe yet, so Chu Fengmian couldn't be bothered to make a move. After all, this was the hidden realm of the divine tree. If Chu Fengmian made a move, he might attract the attention of the barren ancient sect. Before he obtained the jade dew sacred fruit, Chu Fengmian didn't want to be so ostentatious. But teaching a lesson to a few trash from the Valley of the Medicine Masters wasn't enough for Chu Fengmian to make a move. Trash from the Valley of the Medicine Masters? As soon as Chu Fengmian finished speaking, the faces of the Valley of the Medicine Masters turned cold. Chapter 870. Trash from the Valley of the Medicine Masters. Chu Fengmian's words silenced the voices of those present. The atmosphere was so tense that it reached freezing point. What an arrogant kid. Interesting, very interesting. I wonder where this lunatic came from. Apart from the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters, the other warriors began to discuss after hearing Chu Fengmian's words. Their expressions were as if they were ready to watch a good show. As for the disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters, their expressions changed from cold to angry when they heard the discussions. They never thought that Chu Fengmian would dare to speak in such a way. Since when did someone dare to challenge the dignity of the 7 major sects? Trash? How dare you call our Valley of the Medicine Masters trash? Kid, you're too arrogant. The elder of the Valley of the Medicine Masters who had spoken earlier was even more furious. All the spiritual energy in his body had already exploded. Die for me. The elder of the Valley of the Medicine Masters did not hesitate to attack. His realm had already reached the 3rd step of the life and death steps, the immortal realm. As soon as he attacked, an extremely dense spiritual energy bombarded Chu Fengmian. This spiritual energy was so dense that it seemed to want to shatter Chu Fengmian's body in front of it. It could be said that the elder of the Valley of the Medicine Masters did not hesitate to use his full strength. Under such anger, he did not intend to give Chu Fengmian any more time. This move was to kill Chu Fengmian. It seems that everyone in the 9 regions dares to challenge the dignity of the 7 major sects. Kid, go to hell. The elder of the Valley of the Medicine Masters roared angrily. Countless spiritual energies had already enveloped Chu Fengmian's body, trapping him and leaving him with no way to escape. However, from the very beginning, Chu Fengmian had no intention of running away. A mere immortal realm warrior was not qualified to force Chu Fengmian to flee. What a joke. So what if I trample the dignity of the 7 major sects under my feet today? Chu Fengmian's face was extremely calm in the face of the attack of countless spiritual energies. Waves of pure spiritual energy also condensed from Chu Fengmian's body. Chu Fengmian's fist suddenly struck out. As the spiritual energy blasted out, it transformed into a violent storm in the air. The spiritual energy of the Valley of the Medicine Masters Patriarch was swept away by the storm. His body was caught in the storm in an instant. What? What happened? Medicine Capital's ancestor was defeated just like that? One move, just one move, how is this possible? Where did this brat come from? How can his spiritual energy be so strong? In terms of spiritual power, he is even stronger than Yao Jing, who was in the longevity realm. How did he do it? Seeing the changes in this move, the other warriors were stunned, especially the Medicine King's Valley disciples. They had originally wanted to see how the Medicine Capital Patriarch would kill Chu Fengmian when he made his move. After all, Medicine Capital's old ancestor was a longevity realm old ancestor. Wouldn't dealing with an unknown peak life and death realm martial artist be a piece of cake? Who would have thought that such a situation would occur? Damn it. Caught in the storm, Medicine Capital's old ancestor regained his senses in an instant. He had just attacked in anger and did not put Chu Fengmian in his eyes. In his opinion, killing a peak life and death realm martial artist like Chu Fengmian was a piece of cake, so he did not use his full strength. After being caught in the storm, Medicine Capital's old ancestor finally recovered. After all, he was an old ancestor who had transcended life and death. Encountering danger made him immediately sober up. Brat, I didn't expect you to be hiding your strength. But it doesn't matter. No matter how much strength you have hidden, you will die here today. Medicine Capital's old ancestor said angrily as a mirror appeared in his hand. In the mirror, golden threads suddenly appeared. At a glance, there were a total of 3,000 golden threads. The moment these 3,000 golden threads appeared, the storm around Medicine Capital's old ancestor was completely broken. At the same time, these 3,000 golden threads directly bombarded Chu Fengmian's body after breaking through the storm. 3,000 golden illusion mirror. Seeing Medicine Capital's old ancestor make a move, everyone was shocked. This 3,000 golden illusion mirror is an extremely famous heaven-grade spirit artifact in Medicine King Valley. It's actually in Medicine Capital's old ancestor's hands. It seems like Medicine King Valley is determined to get the Jade Dew sacred fruit. Otherwise, they wouldn't hand over such a valuable spirit artifact to Medicine Capital's old ancestor. The 3,000 golden threads condensed from this 3,000 golden illusion mirror are not inferior to a full-powered attack from a life-shattering old ancestor. Even an old ancestor would not be able to withstand the combined attack of 3,000 golden threads. This brat is merely at the peak life and death realm. It seems like it's over. Medicine Capital's old ancestor took out this spirit artifact. He won't give this brat any chance. Seeing Medicine Capital's old ancestor take out the 3,000 golden illusion mirror, everyone felt that the battle was over. These 3,000 golden threads were extremely troublesome even for some old ancestors, let alone Chu Fengmian, a mere peak life and death realm martial artist. However, the next scene was beyond everyone's expectations. Facing the 3,000 golden threads, Chu Fengmian's expression remained calm. He suddenly punched out, bombarding the 3,000 golden threads. Is this brat crazy? Catching 3,000 golden threads with his bare hands? Even a body cultivator wouldn't dare to be so crazy. Before these exclamations could fade away, all the martial artists present obediently shut their mouths. The 3,000 golden threads slashed at Chu Fengmian's hand, but there wasn't the slightest trace of injury. It was as if the golden threads had slashed at a hard rock. Chu Fengmian made a grabbing motion and the 3,000 golden strands were forcibly torn apart by Chu Fengmian. 3,000 golden threads attacking together represented 3,000 life-shattering old ancestors attacking at the same time. Chu Fengmian had actually blocked such a terrifying attack with his bare hands? He had even forcibly torn apart the 3,000 golden threads? Such strength was simply beyond the knowledge of countless martial artists present. Could a peak life and death realm martial artist's strength really reach such a terrifying level? Even the core geniuses of the 7 great sects who have been nurtured since childhood can't reach such a level. Only the most monstrous of geniuses can do all this. How is this possible? The Tianjin sect's old ancestor exclaimed in shock. Chapter 871. The geniuses of the 7 great sects could be considered the most monstrous geniuses in the entire 9 regions. However, there were very few who could achieve this. Moreover, these geniuses were all famous existences in the 9 regions. Just like this, an unknown cultivator had suddenly appeared and possessed such strength. How could he accept this? Of course, the one who found it the most difficult to accept was the Medicine Capital Patriarch. Facing Chu Fengmian, he had already regarded him as an opponent, which was why he had taken out the 3,000 gold illusion mirror. It should be known that the Medicine King Valley had specially bestowed this mirror to him so that he could use it to fight for the Jade Dew sacred fruit. He had used the mirror to deal with Chu Fengmian because he was extremely afraid of him. But now, the 3,000 gold illusion mirror had been forcibly torn apart by Chu Fengmian, turning it into a piece of trash. He had destroyed a heaven-grade spiritual artifact with his bare hands. Chu Fengmian, who was in the air, suddenly struck out with his palm. The spiritual power contained in the Medicine Capital Patriarch's body was almost completely destroyed at this moment. His spiritual veins, body, and internal organs were completely destroyed by this palm. Although an immoral realm patriarch could recover from this kind of injury in an instant, it was still not enough to withstand the pain. However, this kind of pain couldn't be offset. Especially when he was defeated by a life and death realm martial artist in front of so many people. All of this was unbearable for the Medicine Capital Patriarch. "Kid, just you wait. I'm going to kill you. The enmity between us is absolutely irreconcilable. One day, I will trample you under my feet and humiliate you." The Medicine Capital Patriarch roared fiercely at Chu Fengmian. His body moved, wanting to return to the group of Medicine King Valley disciples. "Trying to escape? Did I give you permission to escape?" Chu Fengmian sneered and suddenly waved his hand. The space around the Medicine Capital Patriarch was firmly locked. No matter how much spiritual power he channeled, there was nowhere for him to escape. "Kid, what are you trying to do?" The Medicine Capital Patriarch roared furiously at Chu Fengmian. He originally thought that Chu Fengmian had already humiliated him by defeating him in front of everyone. After all, the medicine capital patriarch was a disciple of one of the 7 great sections. Even the patriarchs of the 7 great sects wouldn't go overboard and deal with him. Countless patriarchs understood the principle of leaving a way out. However, Chu Fengmian was an exception. Chu Fengmian had never thought of leaving a way out. To deal with enemies, he only had one choice: to trample them to death. As for the medicine capital patriarch's identity as a disciple of the 7 great sects, Chu Fengmian, he didn't care. Chu Fengmian immoral realm, Chu Fengmian immoral realm, Chu Fengmian, forgive him. However, Chu Fengmian wouldn't give the disciples of the 7 great sects any chance. Kneel! With a wave of his hand, Chu Fengmian grabbed the body of the medicine capital's ancestor and brought it before him. Medicine capital Chu Medicine Fian's Li. All! Damn it, no one has ever dared to treat me like this. Never! The medicine capital patriarch was furious when he heard Chu Fengmian's words. Making an old ancestor kneel was more humiliating than killing him. He had never knelt even in the face of a powerful old ancestor. It was impossible for him to kneel before Chu Fengmian now. Brat, don't go too far. Do you really think I don't have any other means? Even if I don't fight for the Jade sacred fruit, I will kill you today. The medicine capital patriarch roared furiously. As he roared, waves of medicinal power appeared. These medicinal powers seemed to have been accumulating within the medicine capital patriarch's body all this time. Now, as he opened it, the medicinal power was completely integrated into the medicine capital ancestor's body. This caused the aura of the medicine capital's ancestor to suddenly rise. The spirit force that he had used up was also instantly recovered. Any patriarch had a trump card in a life and death struggle, and the medicine capital patriarch was no exception. It was just that they generally wouldn't use it unless they were forced into a desperate situation. The medicine capital patriarch originally didn't want to use it. Even if he lost to Chu Fengmian and felt extremely humiliated, it didn't force him into a desperate situation. But now, Chu Fengmian made the medicine capital patriarch kneel. This was completely different. This was no longer an insult, but a humiliation. As long as a warrior had dignity, they wouldn't allow themselves to abandon their dignity and kneel. This brat has gone too far. He has forced the medicine capital patriarch to use his trump card. His strength is not bad, but he doesn't know when to stop. When the onlookers saw this scene, they couldn't help but shake their heads as they looked at Chu Fengmian. Doing things this way was indeed a bit too much. No matter what, the medicine capital patriarch was still an patriarch. He must have his own trump card. Among the patriarchs, there was rarely a life and death struggle because both sides would restrain themselves and not force the other to the extreme. Otherwise, a life and death struggle wouldn't be beneficial to anyone. Unless it was a life and death grudge, no one would do such a thing. In their view, the grudge between Chu Fengmian and the medicine capital patriarch wasn't worth it for both sides to suffer. Since Chu Fengmian had already taken the limelight, it was best for him to withdraw. Now that things had reached this point, there was no way to end it. However, the onlookers also had a gloating attitude. Chu Fengmian's strength was strong, so he was naturally their opponent when competing for the Jade sacred fruit. If Chu Fengmian and the medicine capital patriarch really suffered, it would be the best outcome for them. Medicine God's power reversed the universe. The moment the medicine capital patriarch's body completely recovered, a burst of spiritual power suddenly erupted from his body. This burst of spiritual power directly broke the pressure that shrouded Chu Fengmian and turned into a huge millstone that bombarded Chu Fengmian. The moment the millstone was blasted out, heaven and earth shook. It was a shocking move that the medicine capital patriarch had used up all his spiritual power. This move had a significant impact on the medicine capital patriarch's strength, so he wouldn't use it unless he was in a life and death situation. Using this move now represented the medicine capital patriarch's madness. Boom! 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 The huge millstone had already shattered the layers of spiritual power around Chu Fengmian, and its power was getting stronger and stronger. If he could take advantage of this move to completely kill Chu Fengmian. Chapter 872. You still want to struggle? Don't you understand that all your struggles are meaningless in my eyes? Chu Fengmian sneered as he looked at the ancestor of medicine capital, who was still making his last stand. He didn't even use 1/10 of his strength to deal with the ancestor of medicine capital. Now, he was giving the ancestor of medicine capital the illusion of a life-and-death struggle. Suppress. Chu Fengmian only spat out a single word, but his aura rose steadily. Chu Fengmian suddenly threw a punch at the incomparably huge millstone. Waves of spiritual energy collided, and the millstone was suddenly shattered into pieces. The shattering of the millstone simply shattered all of Medicine Capital's ancestors' hopes. The ancestor of Medicine Capital had used his strongest technique, condensing all the spiritual energy in his body to create this huge millstone. But now, the millstone was mercilessly shattered by Chu Fengmian. Since you don't want to kneel, then I'll trample you under my feet. Chu Fengmian sneered and suddenly stomped his foot. The ancestor's face was directly stepped on by Chu Fengmian. The ancestor's head was directly crushed, and the scene was incomparably miserable. With the ancestor of Medicine Capital's vitality, he didn't die from this stomp and directly recovered. However, his face was still under Chu Fengmian's foot. He crazily condensed all his power, trying to escape from Chu Fengmian's foot. But in front of Chu Fengmian's power, the ancestor of Medicine Capital didn't even have the qualifications to escape. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chu Fengmian easily stepped on him. An ancestor without any dignity could only be trampled under Chu Fengmian's foot, unable to break free. The ancestor of Medicine Capital lost. He actually lost so miserably. The ancestor of Medicine Capital even used his last trump card, but he still lost so miserably. The people in the crowd who were gloating over the ancestor's misfortune reduced a lot. They all felt a chill in their hearts when they saw the ancestor of Medicine Capital's current state. No matter what, the Medicine Capital old ancestor was still an old ancestor, especially since he was originally a genius of the 7 major sections. Although he couldn't be compared to the top geniuses, he was still an old ancestor. Although he wasn't among the top geniuses, he was still a famous genius with a high status in the 9 regions. But now, the ancestor of Medicine Capital was being trampled under Chu Fengmian's foot. His face was deformed, crushed, and condensed again and again. The only thing that didn't change was the endless humiliation. An ancestor's humiliation was 100 times, no, 1,000 times more than killing him. Chu Fengmian eye for an eye. The Medicine Capital's ancestor had just declared that he wanted to trample Chu Fengmian underfoot and humiliate him. Chu Fengmian was to let the ancestor of medicine. Bastard. Bastard. I'll kill you. Kill you? The ancestor of Medicine Capital was being trampled under Chu Fengmian's foot in front of everyone. The ancestor of Medicine Capital's expression was extremely ferocious. He urged his spiritual power again and again, trying to break free and resist Chu Fengmian. But before his spiritual power could be fully condensed, Chu Fengmian's foot mercilessly stepped on his head again and again. A crushed skull could be regrown, but the pain was unavoidable. Ah! Ah! Above the canopy, everyone could hear the ancestor of Medicine Capital's heart-wrenching screams. Even though he was an ancestor, he couldn't bear such terrible pain. Kid, let him go quickly. Little bastard, do you really want to fall out with the 7 great sects? Let him go quickly. The people of the 7 great sects won't let you go. You'll be wanted soon, and there will be no place for you in the 9 regions. The Medicine King Valley disciples couldn't bear it anymore and shouted at Chu Fengmian angrily. Little bastard. Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a fierce glint. He suddenly waved his hand and condensed an incomparably huge palm, which directly enveloped them. The few Medicine King Valley disciples who were hooting were immediately locked on by Chu Fengmian, and Chu Fengmian's palm grabbed them. Ah! The few disciples of the Valley of the Medicine Masters who were cursing had no chance of resisting. They were caught in the palm of Chu Fengmian's hand. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chu Fengmian's palm crushed them. Then, a vortex condensed and swallowed all the essence blood of the Medicine King Valley disciples, leaving not a single drop behind. For the life and death realm warriors and even the ancestor, as long as a drop of their essence blood was left, there was a chance for them to be reborn. But this time, Chu Fengmian didn't give them any chance of rebirth at all and directly swallowed all the essence blood. Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. In an instant, several more Medicine King Valley disciples died at the hands of Chu Fengmian. The disciples of the 7 major sects were respected by almost everyone outside, but in the eyes of Chu Fengmian, they were like ants. He killed when he wanted to, without a care. What you are doing is a little too much. This is the Divine Tree's secret realm, the territory of the 7 major sections. If you know what's good for you, quickly release the Medicine Capital Ancestor. Seeing that Chu Fengmian had already begun his massacre, the desolate ancient sect's ancestor, Barren Cloud Ancestor, suddenly spoke up. Although the 7 major sects had their own internal conflicts, they had always been bound together for good or ill. Those ordinary Medicine King Valley disciples and life and death realm warriors dying at the hands of Chu Fengmian was one thing. But the Medicine Capital Ancestor couldn't die. That's right. If you don't want to go against the 7 major sects, you should know what's good for you and be a smart person. The Tianjian sect's ancestor also spoke up coldly. Sir, it's impossible for you to fight against so many of us by yourself. Release the Medicine Capital Ancestor and apologize. Release him at once. That's right, this is the Divine Tree's secret realm. It's not a place where you can act so presumptuously. This child is extremely vicious. It seems very likely that he's from the 6 Paths Demon Gate. Let's suppress this child first. Another ancestor spoke up. This ancestor wasn't a disciple of the 7 major sects, but a disciple of the Black Heavens sect in the southern region. He also commanded a portion of the southern region warriors and belonged to one of the factions. Suppress this child first and save the Medicine Capital Ancestor. The Barren Cloud Ancestor spoke abruptly. He had already gathered his spiritual power and an ancient path suddenly condensed under his feet. Such a vast desolate great Tao, supported by the door of desolation's endless desolate God power, was almost impossible to break. It was an invincible existence. Desolation great path. It is indeed his technique. Secrets. It desolation great technique. Realm. Unless cultivation realm a great realm, great realm path. It. Path it. It. Sect is. Senior brother Huang Yun is invincible. The disciples of the sect of the desolate ancient sect were extremely excited. They were waiting for the moment when Chu Fengmian would be suppressed. Really? Desolation great path? Who do you think you are? You're just an immortal realm ancestor. Even the desolation great path can't protect you. Chu Fengmian suddenly sneered again and again. His sneers turned into dragon roars. Break! As the dragon roars rang out, the primordial war dragon that Chu Fengmian had transformed into suddenly charged towards the Barren Cloud Ancestor. Boom! 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 The desolation great path beneath Ancestor Barren Cloud's feet rumbled under the violent impact. The desolation great path was pushed back. When the last wave of power came down, the entire desolation great path was filled with cracks. Then, with a loud boom, it shattered. In the desolation path, the bodies of the Barren Cloud Ancestor and the Medicine Capital Ancestor were suddenly sent flying. Both of them spat out mouthfuls of blood and fell to the ground. What kind of power is this? The desolation great path has been shattered. Oh my God, is he still human? Everyone looked at Chu Fengmian as if they were looking at a demon. The desolation great path couldn't be shaken by warriors of the same realm, let alone break it. Everyone was stunned as they watched Ancestor Barren Cloud's desolation great path being mercilessly shattered. If it was a more powerful ancestor, they wouldn't be surprised if it was the Desolation Great Path that shattered Ancestor Barren Cloud's Desolation Great Path. After all, the Desolation Great Path was only invincible in the same realm. It was normal for it to be shattered when it encountered a more powerful ancestor. But Chu Fengmian was at the peak of the life and death realm. Originally, he was 3 whole levels away from the Barren Cloud ancestor. Moreover, Ancestor Barren Cloud was a disciple of one of the 7 major sections. His strength surpassed warriors of the same realm. Under such circumstances, Chu Fengmian's gap was even greater. No one would have thought that such a day would come. Monster. Monster. Since when did such a monster appear in the 9 regions? Not good. Let's attack together and suppress this kid. Otherwise, none of us will get the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit. After recovering from their shock, the other patriarchs began to shout out loud. They were all here for the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit. The strength that Chu Fengmian displayed was simply shocking. The first thing they had to do to obtain the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit was to suppress Chu Fengmian. The warriors present had already joined forces, and countless martial skills had already bombarded towards Chu Fengmian. Layers of martial skills enveloped Chu Fengmian at the same time. There was no end to these layers of martial skills. They seemed to be endless. They wanted to crush Chu Fengmian to death and suppress him alive. Boom! Almost at the same time, an unforeseen event occurred above the tree crown. The runes on the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit that had been hanging above the tree crown suddenly condensed. The Jade Dew Sacred Fruit had ripened. Wave after wave of incomparably pure medicinal fragrance suddenly spread out. Seeing the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit ripening, Chu Fengmian finally revealed a smile. Since the Jade Dew Sacred Fruit had ripened, then, there was no need to continue the stalemate. Chu Fengmian's expression became somewhat fierce. His eyes flickered with an ominous glint. Very well, it seems like I don't have time to waste with you. All of you, die! You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.